looks like, and Karen Chapman's also an attendee.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right. As I said, it's going to be a very dynamic meeting today because of the things that have happened that we all are aware of with COVID and the financial cutbacks. We are going to be, as a body, affected by that. And in addition to that, we have as an item on our agenda today having to do with exploring a new structure for our body. So I am going to request, as I have of the two subcommittee chairs, they've heard this over and over from me again, that we as members of the roundtable and the public, please understand that given the conditions that we have now, that we as a body need to remain focused, realistic, informed, meaning educated on the topics, and fiscally conservative this year. So with that, I would like to turn the item over to the election of the vice chair. And as per our standards, Steve Alverson will be conducting this, and we will make sure to have time for public comment.
Madam Chair, Anita Enander here.
Yes.
When would a motion be in order to alter the order of the agenda?
If you'd like to do that now, I'll entertain it.
Given the dynamism that you described, and that we do have Skylar in here from FAA with a lot of interest from, I know, all of our members and the public, I would like to move that we shift the member discussion, at least that portion of it, which has to do with the update from the FAA, to be immediately after number 3, the election of the vice chair.
You're asking for just the member discussion or the announcement of the FAA that Sky is here for the FAA update on Surfer?
Yes, unless the chair would like to do her report at that time, if you think that that would help with the later matters that are on our agenda.
I'm happy to move up the FAA presentation.
Do we need a motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, then I so move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, I think Lydia got that. All right, then we will move just the FAA Surfer letter presentation up to item number, it will become item number 4. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have, this is Kathy. I have a question. If we're taking that out of order, since it's under member reports, would that include all member reports or just that specific item?
I requested that it be only that specific item, as long as that's in order, Kathy.
Okay, I just hope there'll be enough time for other items that want to be discussed too.
Given the fact that there may be some items that are going to be discussed and the public might want to respond to them afterwards, do we want to move that up so that the rest of item 9 goes before what is now item 8?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to amend my motion so that we count for both of those changes to the agenda.
Okay, and so we are moving the FAA up to item number 4, and then the rest of item number 9 up before item number 8, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Steve, do we need to vote on that?
So you haven't voted on the first motion yet.
But it's been amended.
So what we need is a second for the amended motion, and then the roundtable can vote on that. But in general terms, ministerial things like this, if you were to propose it or another member to propose a change in the agenda, and everyone is accepting of that, then you can do it by unanimous consent.
Okay, great. Can I get a second on the amended motion for the rest of 9 to go up before 8?
Second.
I got a second on that. That was Lydia. Good. Then we'll proceed. Any other matters before we go to the election of the vice chair?
We just need a vote on that item.
Okay. Can we take them both together?
Yes. Yeah, it's one motion.
Yes, okay, good. We need a roll call vote then. I'm going to go by who's on my screen. And I'll come back to myself. Lisa Matichek,
Yes.
Lydia Koo,
Yes.
Glenn Hendricks,
Yes.
Liang Chen,
Yes.
Steve Preminger,
Yes.
Anita,
Yes.
Kathy Watanabe.
Yes.
Yes,
I
okay.
think you forgot Liang.
No, I said Liang.
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, I did.
Okay, yeah, so I've got 7. Is that what we have today? We are missing Los Altos and
No, Los Altos Hills.
Los Altos Hills. Yes, we're missing Los Altos Hills. Okay, it passes. We move to item number 3, election of the vice chair. Steve, please.
Just making sure that I'm off mute there. So that our process is when there's an open position, I ask for, call for nominations from the floor for vice chair replacement. And Ed Botteroff was our previous vice chair. They are no longer participating in the roundtable due to budgetary issues. So therefore, we need to elect a vice chair at this meeting. So I would entertain motions for vice chair at this time.
Somebody's got to move. I can't,
It has her hand raised.
Right.
Well, so I have my hand raised.
oh, I'm sorry. I got to get there. Good.
That's okay, but I think I'm the only one with a hand raised. So I will nominate Anita Enander for vice chair.
Do I have a second or does Glenn, does Steve have?
Second.
By Lydia. Okay, are there,
Yeah, I was going to say, are there any other nominations from the floor for vice chair? If not, we can close the nominations.
I had my hand raised. This is Kathy again. Just to keep it interesting, I'd like to just nominate myself. Thank you.
Okay, are there any seconds for nomination?
I'll second it to keep it interesting. Okay.
All right, any other nominations? Currently we have Kathy and Anita. All right, hearing no other nominations, we'll start with Anita, who was nominated first, and I'll go ahead and take roll call.
Sorry, no, that's out of procedure. The
Go
second
ahead.
nomination goes first. And
Okay.
I'd like to
Is
have
it-
public, any comment.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, Steve.
Could we have comments or sort of
Yes,
comments about why someone would want to be vice chair?
yes, we will have it among ourselves and then also from the public.
I was thinking from the candidates.
Oh, sure. Anita, you were nominated first. If you would go first.
Okay. I have been a member only since this roundtable began, unlike some of you who were on the prior either select or ad hoc committees. But I have worked very hard to become fully informed on all of those matters, have attended every meeting, have served now as chair of the technical working group so that I think I have a good grasp of the technical matters, have a deep interest in the success of this roundtable, and would like to apply what I know about how to get through difficult times and financially difficult times, especially, which we're going to have, to helping us be successful. I also worked for the federal government, so I have for 14 years. So I have some knowledge of what it takes to work through the bureaucracy that necessarily accompanies being a federal agency and working with the FAA on matters of interest to all of us.
Thank you, Anita. Kathy?
Thank you, Chair. Well, like Anita, I have been a part of roundtable, the Santa Cruz, Santa Clara counties roundtable from the beginning, and I've attended every meeting. I've also attended every meeting regarding the South Flow Ad Hoc Committee, and I have I'm currently participating in the Ledge Committee. I know that this is a very interesting topic that takes a lot of understanding. However, I have made myself available to learn at every opportunity. And I'm happy to say that the city of Santa Clara has access to an excellent lobbyist through Townsend and Associates, who I'm going to be sharing some information regarding some updated legislative information later on. But I'd like to be a backup person to the chair, and also just offer my services just to continue to be a part of this committee, and just do my part to just do the right thing on behalf of the getting airport noise, getting a better understanding of airport operations and how we can make things better. Thank you.
Okay. Steve, could we now have public input? Public
Sure.
comment?
Spencer, or turn that over to our team, Evan?
I'm looking to see if we have.
So for public comment, we received a question about how public comment will be received. If members of the public can use the raise hand function to indicate that they would like to comment, please do that, and we can go through the list and see who would like to comment. Seeing nobody at this moment. Steve, you want to turn it over for a vote?
Sure. Okay, so no public comment, and we will do Kathy first, and I'll go through the list of members that I can see on my screen with either a yay or a nay. Lisa Manager.
Last time I thought we just said the name of the person we wanted, so, but I guess we're going to do it differently this
You
time.
can do that as well.
Let's just do that. It's faster. Anita.
Sure. You're up, Lisa.
Oh, sorry, I said Anita. Sorry, maybe you didn't hear me.
Okay, thanks. Mary Lynn, you're up next.
Kathy, I seconded her. Nothing personal.
Glenn Hendricks.
Anita.
Leanne.
Anita.
Okay. Leanne.
Anita.
Lydia.
Anita.
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 Steve Preminger.
Anita.
And I think that is all. Oh, Kathy Watanabe.
Kathy.
Well, I better vote for myself. Thank you, Steve.
You bet.
Okay.
It appears that Anita has it in a landslide.
Lydia, I didn't hear. Did you vote?
She put it
You
for
did.
Anita.
Okay, good. I have a different screen than Steve does right now, so it's a little bit awkward. Thank
Welcome
you.
aboard, Anita.
Congratulations, Anita. And thank you, Kathy, for throwing your hat in the ring.
And thank you, Kathy, for making it interesting.
That's what we're all here for.
Aren't we all, really? Okay. So we move now to the item that we have pulled up, which is the item requesting a report from Sky regarding the FAA Surfer Big Sur status.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to first say that we've also got Tamara Swan, the Deputy Regional Administrator, on the line. She's not a panelist, but she's listening in, so she's here as well. And then I will just get started here. So Chair, new Vice Chair, thank you once again for having me speak to this body today. Roundtable members, elected leaders and staff in attendance, as well as community members. It's a pleasure to be here to address you. So, to start, the Federal Aviation Administration continues to work on a proposed change to the Surfer Standard Terminal arrival route into the San Francisco International Airport, which overflies some of your local communities. This proposed flight procedure amendment is designed to address recommendations submitted by the Select Committee on South Bay arrivals. The proposed amendment would move the current Surfer to more closely align with the old Big Sur conventional flight procedure. Pursuant to the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, the FAA is conducting an environmental review of the proposed procedure design amendment. Outside of the FAA's NEPA obligations, the agency will continue to communicate with congressional members and their staff to determine next steps for public outreach. The FAA is developing various communication tools to include videos, flight track maps, storyboards, and other informational materials to communicate this proposed change. So the agency undertook this project at the recommendation of the Select Committee, which is why as an agency, we look to both congressional leaders as well as this body's leadership to aid in future public engagement and discourse. To date, as part of our environmental review, the FAA has sent letters of initiation of consultation under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act with the California State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO, and 3 local governments associated with the area of potential effect. The FAA also sent a letter to the California Native American Heritage Commission, a potentially interested or consulting party in this Section 106 process, asking for their input about potential effects to cultural resources. As the FAA was in the process of initiating consultation, the COVID-19 pandemic occurred. The FAA recognizes that this situation affects the consultation timetable and ultimately those of other federal, state, and local agencies. The FAA will continue to evaluate the situation in the coming weeks and will continue to reach out to other consulting and interested parties. So, as you know, there's no easy answer to address aircraft noise. These active public airports here in the Bay Area have byproducts, both good and bad, to communities. Aviation is taking quite a hit right now, but aviation activity at your airports is an economic engine that brings benefits to your communities. Unfortunately, at the same time, such activity, the coming and going of airplanes, can bother some members of your communities, which is why the collective effort of everyone involved, as we are here today, is so important. We're committed to continue to work with you, the airports, the airlines, and elected leaders on all efforts to address your concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Sky. I have one question. I'd like clarity. You mentioned procedure and you mentioned consultation in what you just read to us. Are we to understand that the procedure has been developed and we now are into a consultation of interested parties portion of this implementation?
That's correct. The design piece is essentially wrapped up.
Thank you. I see Glenn Hendricks's hand raised. Did you want to speak on this topic?
Yes, I do. I have actually some questions or comments about this. I'm a little bit shocked that you're telling us about this and you're not describing anything about timetables. it would really be fantastic to see a Gantt chart or something that says what all the steps are. I believe in a prior meeting that we had, the FAA committed that they would show us a schedule and a plan every time a new procedure change came that was going to be affecting our area. And I think that's where we need to go ahead and start. I mean, before I could even comment on anything about the specifics of this, it would be great to see a schedule. It would be great to have something written down that provided the link that we as committee members and the members of the public could use that would be able to link and go directly to the information that you're talking about, that it would include another link for how members of the public would be able to go ahead and comment and provide feedback and information about this. Am I wrong? Didn't the FAA commit to be able to do those things anytime a new procedure change was coming through in our area? Can someone answer that?
Sky, is the procedure, the process involved with the implementation something that has there are certain things that have checklists that have to occur, and this consultation, am I correct in saying this is at one of the ends of the implementation, and then there will be community outreach and response after the community outreach?
You're 100% correct, but it's not at the end of implementation. It's at the end of design work. So the community involvement piece is still forthcoming.
So there may be some
wouldn't you?
confusion because you've said you finished with the procedure, but now you're saying design work and then community input. So if you
No, design work's done.
Design work is done. So then when does the community input, whether it's from us as a body or the community as large as a body, occur? Just as a process.
As a process, when all consultations are complete, that's when you go back to the community with proposed amendments.
You mentioned 2 consultations. Are there any more than the 2 that you mentioned? Because I'm trying to get to Glenn's timeline.
Right. We've briefed this this roundtable on the process, and when it gets specific to dates and gates, I don't believe that there was a commitment for every procedure along the way to provide a date, but to Glenn's point, I can go back to the agency and see if there's you know, a way to do that. But currently,
so if Sky, if I could just say, what would be really great, and you know, and I'm going to go ahead and throw this card out there. I have a little bit of experience in program management and project management and being able to provide status. This would be a really great place if you had the whole schedule or the process you guys are going to use, which we have asked about documentation for the process multiple times. The FAA has come back and said, you guys customize the process for every process and procedure that goes through. And if this was an 11-step process, to be able to go, here, we're at step 5, and be able to give us context and the members of the public context to be able to know where we are actually in this process. To say that we had some, you know, update in several meetings ago about what was going to happen, and then now we're not tying this status update back to that previous information, it just makes it very difficult for us all to manage and understand and figure out our roles and responsibilities in this process if you guys don't tell us where we are in the role and responsibility process. Is my question making sense?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely clear to me, Glenn. I would just say that being that this is not, again, this is focused around noise concerns and outside of the standard process for flight procedure development, there will be certain things that are different. So I would entertain taking those specific questions on a timetable, but moving forward, obviously, as this was a recommendation from the select committee, as I stated earlier, we needed to see if what we could do as an agency to try and meet that recommendation. And that's what we've done with the design process. So now we'll need to reach out to those elected leaders in this body, have you folks look at what that design looks like and move from there.
Again, I am just shocked that as part of this update, we're not getting information about what the process is, where we are in the process, and what the remaining steps of the process are. This has been a consistent request, and comment about how procedures are done. And I'm not taking this, I've asked a new question here that, we have to have the 30-day, review process or whatever to find out how to comment. This should have been the process and where we are and what the next steps are, and being able to see that in writing. I think that is just fundamental for us, anybody, to be able to understand where we are and what the next steps are and how we can participate.
Glenn, I have an IOU for that in that particular point, where we are in the process. I know we've briefed this roundtable multiple times on our process, and I know Adam Better briefed it multiple times to this body. So if we need to go back and comb over that process and plug in dates, that might be something that we can look into.
So I don't think this is something we need to look into. This is not generic review of what the FAA's process is. This is being able to show the Gantt chart timelines and steps for this specific implementation. And I don't consider it right that it's an IOU. And if you're IOUing it, is it going to come to us before our next meeting? Is that something that could be sent out to all of us in advance of the next meeting? Because otherwise it's completely and totally relevant to what you're saying right now. And I'm absent that information.
Yep, and I appreciate your need for that information. What I will say too, though, is we are in a holding pattern right now with SHPO. So we can't move forward on the next step until that's clarified. So I know.
So there could be I'm just going to say there could be a schedule with the next steps that everything is dependent upon this happening, and everything happens, completion of that plus days. And I'll give it back to the chair.
Okay.
And I'm almost positive that's developed, and we have in our, in our arsenal of in our toolbox, so to speak. So Glenn, I have an IOU, and if there's no other questions.
I have one other hand raised, and that's Anita.
Yes, thank you. I want also to go back to something you said, Sky, because it's part of your current steps. You said that there had been letters sent to the state historic organization and 3 local governments. Can you give us the name of those 3 local governments?
Yeah, I know it was the counties, Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, and the third one is escaping me. So there's someone in the county organization that does receive these notices.
Okay, and do you happen to know what the deadline response time is on those?
So that's again, this is outside of FAA, so.
Right, but I'm assuming when you send them a solicitation for comment, you give them some kind of hoped for deadline.
Yeah, it ranges from 30 to 90 days, but I will say we did receive notice that, we received notice from the several of these organizations that due to COVID, they've got a backlog.
Okay, understood, completely understood. That's my only question at this point. I think Glenn covered everything else well.
Okay. Lydia, I see your hand raised.
Yes, so Sky had mentioned that, and Anita asked, there was the 3 agencies that received the letters. So how does this work? How does from the agency, how is it informed to the cities that they have received this and that these letters, and how is the comment? how do they solicit the comments from the cities, or are cities not included in all of this? Does anyone know?
So the FAA sends out letters to these interested parties. These letters have details and maps in them.
Yeah, so my question would be, I'm glad that it has all those details in it, but once it goes to all these agencies, then how do we get a hold of it? You know, we are the roundtable right now that's representing all the constituents, but we didn't know about it until you just spoke about it. So how are we supposed to?
Let me just clarify that the letters are specifically about impacts on historic properties, and the other one is with respect to Native American sites, and that is the limits on the queries that went out. Is that correct?
Correct.
I see.
That was just for that section 106 piece. Yep.
And then what does SHPO mean?
Thank you.
Yeah, it's state historic. I read it out loud. Preservation Organization Office. Yeah, State Historic Preservation Office.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any further hands raised. I do see 2 from attendees. No, I'm seeing 4 now. I'm going to take you as in the order that I see you listed. Darlene Yapley. We are going to have comments at this point. And I believe we're going to need to limit you to 3 minutes. So Evan, if you can put up a clock, please.
Are you ready?
When we get the clock up, Darlene, we'll do that.
Great.
While we're waiting for the clock to come up, to respond to Glenn's sort of request for a confirmation very early in our meetings, and it may have been before Sky was on board, Fabi did commit to providing the roundtable with schedules for various procedures that would be developed by the FAA when those were available. So Glenn's recollection is correct.
Okay, we're not seeing the clock yet, Evan. And you are muted. Still no clock.
You are muted, Evan. We cannot hear you.
Still muted, Evan.
Yeah, I'm having trouble pulling up the screen. It's not working at this moment. Give me a little bit more time. Sorry.
I will go ahead, if we're comfortable with that, with setting my own that I think you'll hear. And I said 3 minutes. Okay. All right, Darlene.
Providing this short update on the BSR overlay does not address the community's continued requests for the available FAA information. The FAA held a full working group over a year ago on June 2019. We saw some of this information through a FOIA. Additionally, the SFO representative attended the meeting on behalf of the community, but was censored by Raquel Gervin of the FAA to share information with us. This is disingenuous. In Administrator Dixon's January letter to the Quiet Skies Caucus, he states, "I do want to emphasize that I have not seen evidence of a lack of responsiveness to community concerns from the FAA, and I will ensure that the agency remains committed to engagement. For me, responsiveness is defined as engagement and dialogue with the community, ... the willingness to engage meaningfully. The Big Sur overlay is evidence of the FAA's lack of responsiveness to community concerns and not engaging meaningfully. I ask that the FAA, Skylar On and Pamela Swan, and the congressional representatives that are on this call to share the Big Sur overlay as an example of evidence with Administrator Dixon. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next person I have is Robert Holbrook. I'm going to go ahead and start. Whoops.
Good.
Are you ready, Robert? Oops.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
My comment is along the same lines as Darlene's. Administrator Dixon, in his excellent letter to Eleanor Holmes Norton, which is included in the packet, said, for me, responsiveness is defined as engagement and dialogue with a community. And he went on to point out that agreement was a separate matter, which it is. While the back and forth we've had on BSR might be considered a dialogue, in my experience, it has not involved the kind of interactive, timely exchanges that I think many in our community and our leaders have hoped for. The dialogue on BSR, Big Sur, I'll remind you, began in 2016, at which time Glenn Martin, the regional administrator, told us, he warned us, that a solution could take 2.5 years to roll through the FAA's process. So imagine how surprised we in the community were at a meeting last year in Santa Cruz, roundtable meeting last year in Santa Cruz, when we got the update that the FAA was just beginning the first phase of this process of making this procedure real. The interactions on BSR, and I'd add Pirate, might be worth the FAA's review as they finalize their Section 572 report to Congress due in October, which calls on the FAA to assess, among other things, the extent to which there is consultation or a lack of consultation with communities in the vicinity of airports. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see the participants with the clock up. There we go. I'm good now. All right, Jennifer Landesman.
Hi, thank you. I would like to, Skylar, thank you for the update. I want to reiterate what Mr. Hendricks said. For definitely, there have been repeated and consistent requests for this timeline. And one of the commitments from the FAA was to describe the J100.41 process. It is also listed in the phase 2 response that the FAA gave to the community, which I can say was one of the assurances that we had that there would be an environmental review process. The .41 process has basically a framework of preliminary activities, design activities, development and operational preparation, and implementation. And preliminary design activities, an EA is within design activities. I'll read it straight from the document. This includes the creation of a working group in order to design a procedure that meets the project goals and objectives, and environmental review is included in this stage. So building up on what Darlene mentioned and Robert as well, we really need all of the information of the design phase and also to do things differently than we have in the past. And one of those is the employment of alternative metrics, because any assessments that the FAA has done, the exact same information can output other metrics. And that's really critical in this issue because getting assessed, so we really need some noise assessments. And I want to make sure that the way Pirate was designed is not what happens with BSR, because Pirate was done with borrowed data, 1 day's data from an airline, I believe. And then when they tested it the first time, it resulted in opposite directions, like 2 planes are about to crash. Imagine that they would say, oh, we did this in order to address noise concerns. No, we really want very thorough analysis, which is noise related. And I believe that will help with overall analysis of the procedure. And so we really need that data now since it's already been discussed, and we want it much more robust than in the past. the standard at which EAs have been done in the past must change. That was the feedback we've been giving for 6 years, and the one that I think will serve everyone, not just for this procedure. Thank you.
Oh. I'm muted somehow. I'm calling on Marie Jo.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So why is the FA not presenting the Big Sur overlay procedure that has been designed? It's wrapped up. What are they hiding? Furthermore, why do we have an FAA community engagement officer if the FAA does not really engage with this roundtable? To be clear, giving a few minute updates about the FAA consulting with some other group, but not the roundtable, without providing any information on the new procedure and the process is not engaging with the community. So as mentioned by other speakers, the FAA needs to reveal the procedure details and the process step to this roundtable. This is the community. I don't know what other community is there around us. There
Marie
is, of course, doing.
We're losing you.
Yeah, I have an unstable connection today, unfortunately, so I'll try my best. Here's what will happen. At some point, the FAA will issue an environmental assessment. It's called the EA, if they're doing one. The EA will conclude a finding of no significant impact, the famous FONSI. And in every next-gen implementation across the country, the FAA has never found any significant impact, even though complaints exploded everywhere, including here. The 60-day clock will start ticking on the day the environmental assessment is signed. At best, we will get the EA document within a few days. And the FAA may host some community meetings to answer questions as they did recently in the Florida Metroplex. However, the outcome is predetermined. We'll get the same answers as always. 1, no significant impact. 2, everything is done for safety and efficiency. 3, this was a community request, even though the Select Committee did not recommend the Big Sur overlay proposed by the FAA. It's not a full overlay. So in reading the environmental assessment, if we get it, we will also likely discover some questionable assumptions, and we will be skeptical of the very limited data that will be published. However, we won't have a chance to get the answers before the 60-day clock stops. So the process is rigged, it's legal, but it's rigged. There is no true community engagement. And you all know about Ponzi schemes. Well, welcome to the FAA Fonzie scheme.
Thank you, Marie Jo. I have Alistair Fife next up, and he is followed by Jennifer Tassif. Alistair? Okay, he has disappeared from my panel. Jennifer, Alistair, if you want to come back, re-enter, please. And Jennifer, go ahead when you're ready, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to mirror all the comments from the members of the roundtable as well as the public. They are right on, especially Glenn's comments. We sat last year in Santa Cruz with the FAA unfortunately being somewhat chastised in that there was no process, no dates, no Gantt chart, no nothing on the Big Sur overlay. And yet we sit here a year later with the same problem. No Gantt chart, no process, no clear dates. And understandably, COVID will have impact on the dates. But I think at minimum, that information should be made available to the public. You know, design process 1, what it entails, environmental review, public input, estimated dates, etc. The other thing that I'm a little flabbergasted about is there were letters sent regarding historic sites and Native American sites. Those were sent to the counties, yet the body that so many cities are involved in, this roundtable, was not sent a letter. And I don't understand how that could have happened through the FAA, especially since we are one of the main interactive bodies. So I just want to implore the FAA, please come up with a process and just guess some of the deadlines so that people are aware of what's going on here. I can see people struggling. There are hundreds of pages of comments every month from people in Santa Cruz and other cities regarding the Big Sur overlay. They need some answers. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm waiting for the clock to come down. I don't see any further participants. Sky, I have one question for you because there seems to be some confusion again about the process. And without nailing you hard on what the process is, it sounds to me like there's some confusion about consultation with the bodies, the State Historic Preservation Office and the sites, and then the counties. Is it right that throughout the nation, this is a process that proceeds with consultation with other bodies, and then the roundtables provide or are included then with public input, or provide the venue for the public input where they have an opportunity to then have it? Can you say that more clearly than I am as to what the process actually is, so that there's not this confusion about, well, if you reached out to 2 counties, why didn't you reach out to the city of Saratoga, let's say, or the roundtable as a body?
Right. So again, and I stated in earlier that this Section 106 consultation, I brought it up because that's what's happening right now. That's currently what's happening right now. That's where we're at. So that's why I brought it up. But the public input piece, the community engagement piece, the full environmental review piece is all coming. It doesn't go away. This Section 106 is separate from the NEPA process, but it is currently happening right now, and we don't move forward until there's concurrence from those agencies.
Okay, thank you. All right, Steve, are there any comments that you have to make regarding this to wrap it up for us?
No, Mary Lynn, well, actually, yes. One note to make is when we did meet with the FAA in Santa Cruz last year in July, at that time, the FAA said that they would rely on the roundtable, or look to the roundtable for input on where the public meetings would be held. So I would expect, based on that commitment, that the FAA would approach the roundtable and ask for input on where the public meetings for the EA would be held.
And at that time, will we have gotten any, this Sky may be for you too, will we have gotten any further information before we begin to help facilitate the community outreach meetings?
Okay, we've got a lot of information. All right, there's a lot of information and a lot of homework that a lot of people at the agency have been working on. We are waiting for that concurrence from different leaders in the area so that we can move forward with this. Again, this is a community-based amendment request, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. We've spent a lot of time on this. I think it's going to be coloring our conversations having to do with our subcommittees. And so if it is agreeable to all of you, Sky, thank you for coming and making the presentation. And we'll go on. There'll be a lot more discussion coming up, I'm sure. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
Mary Lynn, I just wanted to see if we could give Alistair Fife one more attempt.
Oh, has he come back on?
Yeah, we're gonna try it again. He was having some
Thank
audio
you.
issues.
Thank you for pointing it out.
Alistair, you should be able to find out.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I apologize. I'm having difficulties with connecting. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I wanted to just add something to Sky's presentation, which with regards to community outreach. It's very important that the information about how the community is to supply input is publicized and made available in a timely fashion. It takes, as is well known and has been brought up many times, this is a very controversial area in Santa Cruz County, which will be the area most affected. Within Santa Cruz County, the move of the flight track amounts to something that will benefit a few people to the detriment of a larger portion of the population here and will concentrate noise to one side of the county. It takes a while for people to become aware of this change. And I would really strongly encourage the FAA to publicize the dates under which community input is required, not just to the congressional offices and to the county. This is just part of the transparency of providing the feedback. It's also with respect to the roundtable, it's very important to recall that things have changed since the November 2017 vote. Most critically, the required community consensus as defined by the select committee evaporated once the city of Los Altos Hills withdrew its support. It's not at all clear that there is currently support for this move, and the select committee as part of this feedback process should be assessing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Okay, I'm going to move on, and I don't see anyone else. Evan, good? All right. Then we are going to move, we're going to go back onto the numbers so I don't have to process. It will be item number 4, which is discuss and approve the revised fiscal year roundtable budget. Andy Jordan.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. At the May 2020 meeting, the Roundtable adopted a fiscal year 2021 budget of $250,000 for the revenue, which was held at the same rate as the previous year. And it's the previous rate since the inception of the Roundtable. The members at that meeting, the members from Santa Cruz County, Santa Cruz, and Capitola announced their jurisdictions were withdrawing, and subsequently Montessorino has also withdrawn. It's a 26% reduction in revenue, and you had asked me to come back with a revised budget, of which I am doing now. And in the, I also, because we also have this strange timeline of you not approve of the budget not being approved, and the consultant's contract ending, and it needed to be extended. So I went to the executive board and asked the executive board to approve that that the chair and I would review the scope of work and extend the contract with ESA so that there would not be any interruption with the roundtable. So what I have before you is a revised schedule. Also includes a approximately a 20% contingency or reserve, which is probably pretty similar to what many of your cities and jurisdictions try to maintain. In this case, the expenditures are $2,000 over the revenue, but it's covered, so it's balanced because we're taking $2,000 from the carryover. The It includes a facilitation and consultant services for 172,000, and then reimbursable costs of 8,000, and that includes for instance, the A&R newsletter that you receive. It handles the reimbursements for the cost of a website. Also, any expenditures that they have for printing or any other expenses. I've also included, which is what we are also doing with the board of directors for the cities association, is legal counsel. And that's at the rate at $200 an hour, which is extremely reasonable. And that is so that we are able to have a consultation when needed, and to have an attorney at your roundtable meetings. And also here shows the reduction, the changes in revenue right here. So with that, I pass it back to you.
Thank you, Andy. Also included in that was a scope of work, which was considered. Did you want to talk about that?
The scope of work, I'm going to ask Steve, Mary Lynn and I, well, Steve and I worked on it first, and then Mary Lynn also was consulted and approved the scope of work before I signed the extension of the contract. And what we tried to do was, we tried to look at, well, the first scope of work was created, we could only kind of imagine how we were going to operate and how the roundtable would. And so we tried to take into account what was actually happening. The initial scope of work also didn't take into consideration that we had committees or that there was a strategic plan or a work program. And so now that we have that structure put in place, we can make the appropriate changes. The scope of work allows for quarterly meetings of the roundtable and quarterly meetings for each of the committees. And you can see on the screen before you how we broke that down. And Steve and I had, we went back and forth quite a bit. And I think where we ended up was, I know it's not meeting as much as everyone would like, but it is the reality of where we are.
So the breakdown for the meetings are 4 roundtable meetings, full body, and
for each of the 2 committees, 4 meetings each as well. And so I think what we would be recommending is there would be a roundtable meeting, the next month would have a committee meeting, and then the next month would have another committee meeting. But that needs to be worked out with ESA. But that's what we are recommending.
And hopefully with input from the chairs of the subcommittee, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, good. Does anybody have any comment about what we're seeing now, or do we want, I see Anita right away.
I think that Steve has some comments about the scope of work as well. Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think Andy did a great job covering where we wound up on the scope of work. And the idea was to take that initial budget in scope of work and fit the scope of work to the budget that's available. And our biggest amount of effort is in preparing for the meetings, following up to the meetings. The actual meetings themselves are a few hours, as we are experiencing here today. So that's not a big lift. And while we have recommended that we could do 4 regular roundtable meetings, 4 committee meetings, and 4 or technical working group meetings, and 4 legislative committee meetings, as long as we stick to the 12 meeting schedule, we could potentially be flexible within those timeframes, because there's not a substantial amount of difference between preparing for a committee meeting versus a regular roundtable meeting. The regular roundtable meetings tend to be a little bit of a larger lift, but we purposely left the scope open so that it referred to 12 meetings and didn't pin us down to any sort of set of committee meetings or roundtable meetings.
Okay, Andy or Steve, anything else to add before I ask for questions from our members? Okay, I see nothing. I am trying to figure out how to, I can see Anita's hand. Okay, and now yes, Go ahead, Anita.
I'd like to stick with the numbers before we move to or I propose we look at the numbers before we move to the scope of work, Madam Chair. And if that's okay with you, I'd like to ask Andy a couple of questions, if she would please put those first 4 pages that have all the budgetary stuff back on the screen, or whoever was doing that. So if you go to the first page, yeah, I was struggling in the right-hand column there to understand how you got to 187,597 and 78, because no combination of those numbers added up to that. I eventually concluded that you had plugged that as being the number for what the proposed, the planned revenue for the year was. And then in your comment just now, I think I heard you say that there's a $2,000 overage, because indeed, when you add 172,000, the 8,000 and the 9,600, you get 189,600, which is kind of sort of about $2,000 greater than the amount of the revenue. And so you're saying that $2,000 difference would come from the reserve, and that is your plan. Is that correct?
Yes, so I appreciate always having the editor on hand.
I'm sorry, but
it's
the numbers and I went,
it's a fair catch. So the total is the total revenue. And so we received $250,000, and this total revenue is, and I think that the contract that, so I didn't sum that. So that bottom one is the total revenue, and those numbers do come out to be the total for expenditures is 180, goes back
89,600.
Yeah, 89,600, yes.
Right.
And so,
okay. And so then my next question is, because I was trying to track the aggregate reserve. And so when I went to the 3rd page, where at the top there, where you have the prior year, you have these are all the expenses basically since we started. And I added everything up. When I was in the actual expenditures, my summation of that column is $333,079.81. And the difference of my sum versus what you show is 1443. So I think
so that's
all of that. They
so
didn't.
Yeah, there must, it was a copy from a spreadsheet, so it must have missed that cell in the calculation.
It missed that cell.
Yep.
So if we're going to rely on this document in future times, it might be good to readjust that. So that then when I got that number, which was actually 333,000, not 331,000, and I subtracted that from the total revenue, I then got, instead of 43,000, I got $41,920.19, which actually then still doesn't match what's on the next page for the contingency. So it's not a big shift. It's like $560 off, but we're not reconciled, Andy, and that concerned me.
No, we're not reconciled because I had to try to put the numbers together because it hasn't been audited yet. So that is why I have.
Right, but even so, when you're presenting numbers that are supposed to match and they don't match, I got a little bit, no, I spent a little more time on this than I felt I should have had to. I'll put it that way. So just so you know where there's still kind of glitches here, the actual expenditures total is different. So the reserve, or the imputed reserve, is 41,920.19, whereas what you show on the final amended budget on page 4 is 41,360. So it's still off about 500 and some bucks.
Great,
So
I'm happy to
put all of this together.
You could have called me and we could have discussed it earlier.
Well,
so we could have had
I
a
apologize. I
resolution.
frankly was looking at this late last night. Okay, trying to, because I did everything else and I left the numbers for last. So
as Andy has said, this is not a final audited amount, but Anita, I really appreciate it since it's so important these days that what we do have, what we're depending on for reserves, and where our money is going to be allocated. So I appreciate
So
the
my
Dick.
net conclusion from all of this is that given the estimated or the recommended budget, we would already be planning to draw a couple $1,000s on reserves, but we expect to have a reserve somewhere slightly in excess of $40,000, depending on what the final audited numbers are. Is that a fair summary?
Andy, you're on mute.
Yes, that's a fair summary, and that's exactly what I presented.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Could I have some clarification on that, Anita, not from you, but piggybacking on what you said, that when we get to the item having to do with creating an ad hoc, we may need some of that reserve. Can the reserves be used for operations, though?
Is that a question for me?
Yes, it is, Andy.
I wouldn't recommend you using all of the reserves for operations because you won't be able to maintain that next year. That's
right. And the money, yeah, okay. So any money that was left over from last year, are you recommending that we put it into reserves and not draw on it?
I'm recommending that you put it into reserves so that you can use it for either something comes up and there is an urgent meeting that you need, or some technical work that is urgently needed, or toward formalizing your own entity, which is another discussion.
Okay, that's what you just asked, Madam Chair, was whether we could use it for the ad hoc.
Yeah, yeah.
So
exactly.
I guess the answer is yes, not no.
All right. Kathy Watanabe, I see your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have a question about the attorney costs. And first, my first question is to Andy. Did I refresh my memory? Did we approve as a roundtable the hiring of an attorney to have them at 12 meetings?
No, this would do it for you. No, yes, this isn't for 12 meetings. I think that we're really recommending a per month cost for any review of letters or anything like that, but definitely at the 4 roundtable meetings.
Okay, because the $9,600 is being allocated for towards each of those 12 meetings. So
and not necessarily each of those meetings, but definitely the 4 roundtable meetings.
Okay, and is that a capped cost? Because my other question is working with attorneys, as long as I have, there's always research to be done, things to be looked up after the fact, questions to be answered, and get information for. So, I mean, what if the cost exceeds $9,600?
No, I will make sure that the contract, the beginning contract that we've had with Shantine has been like a do not to exceed. And so it will be, yeah, no, this would be a do not to exceed.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, Lydia Koo. You're muted.
Yes, yeah. I think, okay, I thought I saw Lisa before me, but unless that's okay, I see her hand has, oh, there she is.
Sorry, it's just.
Do you want to go first?
It's printing out for me. Do you, either one of you want to go before the other?
It's okay for Lydia to go. I have a process question.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm looking at this, you know, the 9,600 for the attorney, and one of the items that you said, reviewing the letters that we're going to write. We don't write the letters during the meeting, so I don't understand why are they having to sit through all our meetings and we're paying $200 an hour for it. So this 9,600 seems to be excessive if they're going to be reviewing the letters later on and not have to go through our meetings. Can you please kind of help me understand all of this? And in the 3+ years that I've been attending San Francisco Roundtable, they've not had an attorney there. So I'm not seeing why we need an attorney at this point. And please, no offense to Shantine, who's sitting here listening to all of this. Andy?
Yes, because we have had Brown Act issues, and in order to, we would like this organization to get up and to run well. I mean, reviewing letters or giving advice to someone running an organization, it's about putting together a team that will help you function its best, and that's what this is all about. We are clearly trying to give you a team that will help you operate well.
I appreciate operating well, and the Brown Act. We are council members, and we have gone through AB 1234 and gone through Brown Act lessons at council own. So, I really don't see why we need this 9,600 that is going to attorney to be sitting over there to make sure that we run this well. And I actually don't believe that we didn't run this well. Yes, at the beginning, we do need to have our work plan, our strategic plan, MOU, and contracts reviewed. But to continue on now with this excessive expense when we are having an issue with budgeting, with our finances being reduced, I think we need to be a little bit less frivolous with how we're spending this money. So I really object to this amount. Then my second question is, this Brown Act class that we all had to go through and sit through last time, did we as a roundtable approve that expense? I don't remember approving it, and I don't remember it coming up, and I am not really sure why and how did it get onto our agenda when we already have such a tight schedule where we had so many things that we need to get onto that pertains to our constituents and their quality of life. I would really like to know, how did that 5,000?
Are you asking me about a past expense in a different fiscal year?
Yes.
Because there were Brown Act issues, the executive board of directors and the board of directors of the Cities Association as your fiscal agent decided that it was appropriate to have a Brown Act guide put together and to have an attorney to advise on Brown Act issues, because there were multiple issues that we needed to discuss.
And were those listed to us that we had violated whatever kind of Brown Act issues that we were talking about? I mean, I really have an issue with this whole Brown Act thing, and actually how you are in a way kind of controlling what we're going to be talking about, and coming to a conclusion also and inferring that we don't know what we're doing. This expenses should have come to us first, whether executive, the executive committee is not reimbursing us this $5,000 from a past expenditure. And I really did not know that we were spending this kind of money on a Brown Act class that we needed to take, that we have already taken. So this, I think that I need to know what was the Brown Act violations that us as a committee had conducted. And if you can't tell me now, tell me at the next one, or send us an email, but let us know what was the Brown Act violation that we had.
The issues were that we set up committees and we had crossover members. So one committee had 6 members on it, and another committee had 4 members on it, and 2 members were crossover members. The chairs notified the chair of the roundtable that they wanted to work collaboratively. Anytime that they discussed anything that was the same, it would be a Brown Act violation. So we were trying to deal with that without having to come forward and ask people to change their committee membership without it seeming political, because you each have your own priorities and issues.
I'm going to take exception to something that was just said, because there was no problem with setting up those committees with crossover membership. And I spoke with the chair of this roundtable, and ahead of time, before we had our meeting, to make clear that, and stated at our meeting, and Andy, you were there, so you heard me say that because we had members of both committees, one or more present, that we would be certain to limit our discussion to only those items that were on our agenda, and specifically not raise any item that had been discussed at any other subcommittee unless it was a matter of public record.
It was prior to that. It was prior to.
And Madam Chair, I have my hand up. I wanted to weigh in a little bit.
Yes, Steve. And I won't forget you, Lisa.
And I'm really concerned about sort of the tenor of this discussion. The Cities Association is our fiscal agent, and I think Andy is simply representing them. I am very concerned that the Cities Association, to be really blunt, seems to want to cut us loose. We have X amount of money, we have X amount of time, and if they feel that their interests are protected by us having counsel working with us, as I see the county do with all its boards and commissions, I think that's the way it is. And I don't know how much time we're going to spend going back and forth. We've asked Andy to get back to us on, Lydia asked, and I assume she will, on what the Brown Act violations were specifically. I think we need to move on.
Thank you, Steve. We are talking about something that happened in the past. I think there is an opportunity now for better communication among the roundtable members, the chair, whoever the project manager is going to be, and the Cities Association, because it was a fact that we as a roundtable did not know that we were going to be incurring $5,000 in legal fees. As we've said, yes, the bylaws and the subcommittee setups, the work program, the strategic plan did need review. The MOU was eventually going to need review. We are going to have needs for legal counsel going forward in whatever form we are in. But I think it's realistic to talk about what our budget is going to look like now. And
I'm not done yet, actually.
I appreciate that.
Appreciate that we don't know what our expenses are, especially when we are in a difficulty and reduction. So my tone might not be happy right now because it was pushed upon us without us knowing what we're going to be faced with. And if we're violating, you could simply, the executive board could have Andy come and tell us that, and certainly to the chair and vice chair, you're in communication with the executive board. They could have just come and told us, instead of having us sit through, I don't know how many hours, probably 1 hour of listening to Brown Act that we already know about, and spending $5,000. So that is my complaint right now, and I want it, and it's recorded, so I appreciate that. And I really hope we don't have to go through this again. We should know what we're spending money on. I think, the money that we spend on ensuring that the quality of life for our constituents are top priority, not this kind of thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. I'm sorry if I cut you off. I didn't mean to.
Madam Chair, just a time note, we're
Yes.
at about the period of time that we had reserved for this, so just to
Yeah.
make sure that we move things along.
I do want to recognize Lisa because her hand was up, possibly before Lydia's, and I do see Liang is there. If you can keep time in consideration, I'd appreciate it. Lisa.
Yeah, thank you. I share the comments that have been made so far. I also couldn't reconcile the numbers on this and didn't have time to call for clarification. I do think the roundtable needs to be the one that decides on how the money that we have is spent. Even if somebody has a recommendation on how we should be spending the money, just bring it to us, but we should know how the money's being spent. I had some potential changes to the scope of work, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time for you or for me to share those with you, or how do you want to work this?
We've just been doing the budget, but I think given the time limitations, Lisa, go ahead, dive in.
So given the uncertainty around the relationship between the Roundtable and the Cities Association, and given that this scope of work is for a year, I thought it'd be good to make a couple of tweaks here. It seems like we shouldn't be specific about the Cities Association project manager, but have a more generic project manager title in case we are becoming separate from the Cities Association. And then there's also some tweaks I'd like to make to the role of the project manager versus, frankly, the role of the chair of the Roundtable. I think the Roundtable chair should have a little bit more authority to do some things. I personally view the project manager as more of a staff role and the chair as more of the content role. So I have suggested changes. I can go through them, or how do you want to do this?
We have to pass this today. So we need to, in terms of the scope of work, first and foremost, are we comfortable with the scope of work with ESA as it is set out for the tasks?
So I'll answer just me personally. I'm okay with ESA. It was the role of the project manager in the Cities Association and the chair that I was concerned about.
Anita, I'll have to come back to you. I see you shaking your head. Okay. And Lydia too. All right. We have to hammer through this today. But remember, Lisa and Anita, it's important that we get to your items in terms of the discussion, because this is how we set our priorities. And I think the last item, I'm hoping without any a lot of input from anyone, can move forward. So Lisa, move forward, please.
Okay, so I'll just say my proposed changes. On page 13, in the first column, the very last part, I would strike Cities Association and/or. So it would say, as requested by the Roundtable on a variety of topics. In the second column, a couple lines above deliverables, I would strike Cities Association Project Manager and. So they would be submitted to the Roundtable chair or the committee chair.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow.
Sorry, am I going too fast?
Yeah, a little bit. I got the last one. It's the last two sentences on the first column, right? As requested by the.
And I would say as requested by the Roundtable on a variety of topics.
Okay. Go ahead.
And then in the second column, it is 1, 2, 3, 4 lines above the word deliverables, or that section.
Yes.
I would strike Cities Association Project Manager and. Because this is the Roundtable chair working with ESA on the content.
Go ahead.
Then in the deliverables section, the second bullet point, the last part, looks like this is all one sentence. So I would end that sentence after Roundtable work program, period.
Okay, I'd like to get an answer on that as to who was intended on that part. Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
And in the task schedule, I would strike and Cities Association Project Manager.
Go ahead.
On page 14, the first column, the third line, I would just strike Cities Association and make that the generic project manager.
Okay.
And 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down for that, strike and Cities Association Project Manager.
The whole thing, not just Cities Association.
Correct.
Okay.
And then 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down from that, just strike Cities Association and just have project manager. So the general idea is the content goes to Steve and the chair a couple weeks before the meeting, and then you have the opportunity to work on content. And then a week before the meeting is when I would say staff kicks in and helps with pulling the meetings together.
Okay.
And that's what those changes are about.
Can we get some response from Steve and Andy on that before we move on to task number 1.2?
I can go ahead and chime in, and then Andy can follow after. From our standpoint, these are ministerial changes. It doesn't change our scope of work materially, so it's not a problem from our standpoint. It does seem to me, though, that the funding agent is the cities association, so the contract is with them. So there needs to be something within the contract that ties the scope to them and their approval of our work in whatever way whatever form that takes.
How do we proceed with this should mid this fiscal year we end up on our own and some other? Can we revisit that and then rewrite the scope of work? Approve it today, and then with the idea that if we have a different structure come January, that we can revisit this for those corrections?
Generally, those types of changes, ministerial type changes, can be made by mutual agreement between ESA and the Cities Association. So they can come up, Andy and I can discuss them, and then they could be approved, assuming that they're acceptable to Andy and the Cities Association. But I certainly would want to hear from Andy, since she's the project manager.
Yes. Andy?
Yes, I just would like to remind you that as a fiscal agent, we are the one, and per the bylaws and MOU, I am the one that oversees the staff. So I just want to remind you that any changes where you change the project manager to just be a project manager, that's fine, but I'm still the one that directs the staff in order to make sure that we're within budget.
So if we were to have a new project manager, that would go to that person.
That person would, that person would oversee it if it was a new project manager.
Okay, this is where it gets tricky because we may, I see you, I hear you, Shantine. That's why I asked the question of Steve. We might be able to stay under cities. We might end up being a JPA. We might be going to somebody else. But there would be a project manager that would have to run this as the overview person for that fiscal agent. And that's what you're getting at, right, Andy?
Yes, there will be a project. You'll have a project manager at some point along the way. You don't want to mix staff role and I mean, the chair shouldn't be following the dollars. That's what the project manager does. And I think that Shantine wants to interject here just about the role because of our contract.
Please.
Great. Thanks so much for allowing me to be present and to speak on this. My understanding is that, again, obviously the Cities Association is the fiscal agent here, and it has direction as well as oversight of staff. My bigger concern, and I think Mary Lynn, you were kind of speaking to it, is what happens at this point since this has been agreed to, and Andy has already signed on to the terms that have been listed out. It doesn't mean it can't change in the future, but I would suggest that striking those portions that have already been signed under contract might be complicating of the issue. So I think that going forward, it makes sense, especially if the roundtable decides or kind of is cut loose or does its own thing going forward. Of course, this will change substantially. But at this point, my understanding is that Andy has already agreed to these terms and they were already pre-approved to that extent. And so I would just say that, I would be careful about trying to go back on those obligations or trying to revisit these things if they've been signed on to. If there's a different project manager that's appointed, that can be worked out in the future and may very well need to be if the Cities Association does disassociate from the roundtable in any way.
Lisa, does that make any difference in the questions that you're asking? There are a dozen or more instances of Cassie and project manager being listed in here. Are we comfortable with the idea that we are now in this situation and we're going to go forward with that part and then have it be changed should we have a different structure? Or are there some specifics to how the relationship exists? And that's why I tried to separate out the part of the fact that we need to have the contract today. We need to move forward because this affects our contract with ESA. And so we need to focus on the questions in that regard. And I'm hoping that where I see you have questions with Cassie here and well, as I said, at least over half a dozen places. I guess it's the question of the relationship. Do you understand? Is there something specific now that we've heard from Andy that needs to be changed in the relationship between the project manager, the chair, and ESA?
Well, I personally think there is. I think the chair should have more responsibility for things like content, not the project manager. I think, you know, the roundtable members are the ones who are focusing on that. And we're looking to the chair to take our input and, you know, represent us at the meetings when you're planning for these things. And so I do still have issues with how this is set up. But to me, this is a classic example of, I think this should have come to the roundtable first before it was signed.
We couldn't do that though. And I went to the executive board. We couldn't do that because we found out at the last hour. And this is a carryover of it's very similar in content to previously our first scope of work, and City of Mountain View, City of Palo Alto were involved in writing the scope. And quite a few city managers looked at it as well when we originated this. And then we had the problem where we lost 4 members but needed to sign a contract with ESA. I went to the executive board to ask for direction, and the executive board agreed that if I worked with Mary Lynn, that we would, and Mary Lynn agreed to the scope, that I would sign it so there wouldn't be an interruption. You all would have been really, truly, excuse my French, pissed if I didn't sign a contract and we couldn't have a meeting. So I had to do something, and things can be amended. But I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so.
And I have a question if I could. I'm just curious, is there a problem with Mary Lynn working with Andy? Lisa, I mean, I assume that Mary Lynn's not giving up her authority. She's still chairing this. That's the position she's coming from. And I'm just not sure what the problem is that's having us take this much time, and when we have other issues to come up with. And is this the time to try to change it again? Our relationship is with the fiscal agent, as is our relationship with Steve and ESA.
Lisa?
If you're asking me specifically, yes, I do think there still are some issues, but, you know, we weren't given this, you know, to weigh in on. And I think we've seen over the past year that there were some issues with how this was originally set up that have caused us to not be able to move as fast as we wanted to, and some issues about roles and responsibilities. I think this is the time to address that, but this was already signed.
Given the fact that it's signed, that we need a contract with ESA, is there a happy place that we can reach where we say, all right, the scope of work, in other words, especially what ESA is doing, and we find that under the deliverables, under every task, that we can approve that much and then make efforts to re-edit the document when it has to do with whatever issues you have that have to do with the position of the chair and the project manager. Anita.
Pardon me. I can understand doing that for the sake of being expeditious. There are 2 changes I would propose to the way the budget is aligned with tasks. And so I don't know whether the scope of work would need to be changed if we change the allocations. Specifically, those are, I would like to see us spend less on the website And by specifically not putting certain things on the website that are there that I think are probably taking time, I'm looking now for efficiencies in ways we can reallocate funds to be spent more on the technical work for which ESA has exceptional capability and which we need. So for example, the fact that we put all of the SFO and Oakland Roundtable and Forum information on our website, I think we really don't need to do. There are some other tweaks like that. So I don't know whether we could say we want to reduce the amount of money that's in our document in front of us with respect to a website and reallocate it to more technical work. I don't know if we need to change the scope of work to do that, or we de facto do that by changing the budget. Similar thing with respect to the, oh, sorry, now I lost myself. The, beep, I've got you in front of me
you
now
are
instead of my document.
regrouping. Could I have
Sorry.
Steve respond?
Communications, pardon me, communications with respect to the public. I would like to see us, I'm sorry, but Steve has done such an incredible job of responding and with great detail on technical issues to the public. And while I understand that it is significantly our role, in this resource constrained circumstance, I have to look at the greater role of the roundtable, and I have to believe that reducing some of the funds and some of the detail with which we're responding one-on-one to the public would better be served by allowing us to do more technical work in the roundtable.
I'd like Steve to respond to that, Anita. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Anita, the way that we've generally worked it so far is, while we would like to, as consultants, always hit our marks in terms of each of those individual tasks, as we've seen over the past year and a half, some tasks have taken more time, some have taken less. So we could certainly, if there's a desire to dial down, if you will, some of the tasks and dial up others, we could do that by mutual agreement with Andy, and then just make sure that we manage that in terms of the amount of effort that we put into it. So that, for example, if we want to spend more time doing technical work, we would do that and move some of that money over to from, say, communicating with the public to the technical work. We don't necessarily have to change it within this document. And again, I'll have Andy confirm that, because that's kind of the way we worked over the past year and a half.
And it looked to me also, Steve, like we didn't have to really change the task specifics. If we changed kind of the dollar allocations, I assumed, having been in your place, that that's what you would say.
Yep.
How did you arrive at where Steve, where you thought you would hit on technical? I mean, were you comfortable enough with that you thought that you wouldn't have to pull back on website or communications with the public?
Well, how we got there was based on what we've done to date and the amount of effort that we've spent in those various areas. And so sort of knowing what we did in the past, we forecasted that moving forward. As you know, we've done virtually no technical work to date. We would love to absolutely do some technical work to date. So that's the one bucket that is sitting there that's been, almost untouched since the time that we've been doing this. So if there's a desire for us to do more technical work, we could certainly dial down some of those other tasks. And again, I would just want to have Andy confirm, based on our previous practices, that she's comfortable with that, as long as we fall within the overall budget that we have.
And that's what we have done in the past. When we realized you weren't going to be doing as much technical while we were working through the strategic plan and the work program, we just moved from one area to another.
Right.
Without having to look back at the scope of work.
Yeah.
Anita, are you comfortable with that then?
Yes,
with what you suggested.
My only question is, when we eventually get to a motion, do we need to have specifically changed page 3 of Andy's document, which has estimated hours and budget for tasks 1 through 5? Or do we say, past practices that we can move money within the total allocation to ESA and not worry about it? And I think that's what I need to know before we get to a motion.
And I'm just, again, would ask Andy to confirm that that works for her.
That's fine. That works for me.
Good, thank you. Lydia, you had your hand up. Lisa, were you through for now? I think we're going to have
yes.
Okay, and Lydia?
It's about the contract, the wording in there, pretty much similar to what Lisa had spoken about. I get worried about, cities association as the fiscal agent and stopping us in everything that in most of the things that we might want to do. And, task number 3, it says that, even in the title, it says with concurrence of the SCSC project manager. So if there's a project that we want to look into, it has to be with a concurrence. But we're also on a timeline, which is sometimes very short. So I just want to put to your attention that this contract is limiting us in a lot of ways because it requires concurrence. Excuse me. It requires the oversight of the project manager. And I'm not quite sure that we as a committee, should be restrained in such a way. That's all so I would really love to revisit this, as soon as possible.
I see Shantine's hand up.
Thank you, Mary Lynn.
Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate it. Lydia, to your point, I think the issue of concurrence more pertains to the amount of funds that are allocated to certain exercises as opposed to the content of what the roundtable would like to do. It has to do more with the, particular restrictions or allocations of staff work and the budgetary requirements. So, while I am speaking on behalf of Andy, I think it's fair to say that it's not that she's controlling the content or the ability of the roundtable to meet or discuss, but it's making sure that you guys have what you need to carry out your activities. And that means being able to meet, that means being able to distribute certain documents amongst each other, being sure that ESA is on board and that they're being coordinated with as well.
Thank you, Shantine. But I do beg to differ because there is content that has been interfered with. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Liang.
Hi, yeah, hi. First, I'd like to thank Andy for signing the contract. I know that there is kind of time constraint and you have to sign the contract. However, that does not prevent us from amending the scope of work so that we can be more effective in what we do. So I hope that we can maybe form a subcommittee of some sort to amend the scope of work so it doesn't hinder the purpose of the roundtable. And then I'd like to second what Lydia had said when she spoke earlier regarding all the legal costs. I wasn't on the roundtable last year, but then the last meeting when I was on, I was very surprised. This roundtable was wasting time amending bylaw on how subcommittee would work. We all have subcommittee and commissions in all our cities. We know how it works. We don't have to write everything down. When there are issues, and Brown Act training, we all have that, but usually when there are violations, it's usually issues that's not covered by any training. Then we might need maybe an attorney on retainer as issues comes up to resolve a certain dispute on how we understand the Brown Act. That should be as needed purpose. We don't need an attorney every minute of the meeting. The reason some commissions have attorney, for example, in our cities, planning commission has meetings because they make decisions that's judicially nature, but all other commissions don't have an attorney because they don't make decisions that have any legal impact. And for us, we don't make any decisions that will actually have a legal impact. We make advices And so I don't see the value of having an attorney here just to watch out for wrong act. It's really a waste of time.
Thank you,
And
Jane.
I think we need to modify that in our budget. And I second what Lisa would like and Lydia would like to modify on the scope of work and Anita. So let's amend the scope of work and cut the budget where, cut the legal cost and it's not necessary. And Anita's comment on reducing the website cost and the time to respond to residents. Thank you.
Okay, Steve, I know you've been waving your hand, and Glenn, I have you next in line.
Yeah, again, I continue to be frustrated with the conversation. You know, you mentioned that we don't need an attorney, and if there's violations, or concerns, it's usually things that aren't part of what we're trained for. I think that speaks to exactly why you do need an attorney, and the attorney is there, you know, watching us, but also representing the cities association. And bottom line is they're still our fiscal agent. And Andy is working with them. But back to the earlier point about Mary Lynn, she has been empowered, the chair has been empowered to act on behalf of the association between meetings. And I feel like she's done that well. She's representing us well. So, you know, I was prepared to make a motion to accept the budget as presented and allow us to move forward. I just think we need to get on with things.
Okay, I'm going to call on Glenn, and then we'll move from there, so we get everyone to speak. Thank you for waiting so patiently.
I wanted to go ahead and I'm willing to stipulate that we have a very complex governance relationship here. And I think we already have an item on our agenda, which is 7, to go ahead and how we're going to have to deal with this separation or non-separation thing that goes out. I think some of my colleagues have brought up some very good points that would become, to me, you know, objectives or success criteria for how the new structure, governance structure we want to put in place would be held there. And I think a lot of good points were made, but trying to change this governance structure on the fly, I think we'd be better off trying to take these things that have been discussed here and have those be requirements or success criteria of what the outcome of item number 7 is. I have a much more specific question. And this is, I'm sorry to the public that's out there, but it's going to be on, I think it's page 10. It lists what cities are putting money into this meeting structure. And I don't need an answer now, but it would be really interesting to know in the future if we have an item that, for example, has what might be a lot of speakers from Santa Cruz County come and want to speak, and Santa Cruz County has decided that they don't want to fund this year. And are we going to go ahead and put resident speakers from non-paying cities? Are they going to get the same opportunity to weigh into us as others? I know that may be a little bit controversial, and I don't need the answer right now, but I'd love to be able to answer that, because I can foresee in the future an item that might affect a lot about Santa Cruz, and we might have a really long set of speakers from Santa Cruz, and Santa Cruz County and those cities have chosen not to participate here. And I think at some point we need to figure out how we're going to deal with that. And I yield my time.
Thank you, Glenn. Jimmy Panetta, the representative from that county, is very much still engaged. Just to answer, there's no money. They didn't choose not to. They don't have it. But that's a bridge we'll have to cross when we get there. Right now, I'm not seeing anybody I'm seeing one 831 number. Anyway, we do need to get to the public. I'm going to beg the public, because we are so far behind. I see 3 requests from Darlene, Marie Jo, and Robert Holbrook to keep the comments to something new and different. If you hear Darlene say something, Marie Jo, don't repeat it. And if you have heard your representatives say it, just say, I agree with Lisa's fact number such and such, or whatever. When the screen went up, my screen went down. Darlene Yapley, could we go to 2 minutes, please? I'm really concerned about our time, but I want to hear from everyone.
No problem. Today we have less funds. We need to do things differently. It's painful for all of us, but we need to do it. The overarching comments is that we need money for meetings, more meetings than the 12, and technical work. And everything else has to be considered on the chopping block or to be reduced. And some of those things are legal fees, website, responding to inquiries, letter tracker, things like that. Leanne and Anita mentioned this, and I do believe that if we can approve the contract, but then amend the scope of work later is the right thing to do. And I support what Leanne suggested. There should be an ad hoc committee that goes in and readjusts the buckets, working closely with Steve, obviously, and so on, to reallocate the budgets. I mean, a lot of that is nice to have, but reformatting emails, doing news feeds, responding to people that are not even members right now. I mean, these are things we just can't afford. And the public, I'm asking questions here. No one's responding to me. Is it better for me to send an email than to speak at the meeting? These are things we have to make trade-offs on. So ad hoc committee, Leanne, let's make it happen and let's go reallocate the funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Darlene. Marie-Jo, 2 minutes. You're muted.
Okay, so I have 2 comments. Comment number 1, I think 12 meetings total for the...
Oh, we need to reset you. Sorry.
Oh,
2 minutes
sorry.
for you, Marie. We're counting down right now. There you go. Okay. Good.
So my first comment is 12 meetings total for the roundtable, and the committees will not be enough to get the work done. The roundtable should really meet every 2 months for 2 hours instead of every 3 months for 3 hours. It's the same amount of hours, a total of 12, and it will allow the roundtable to be more responsive and more agile. And your meetings can be shortened to 2 hours because now you have committees in place. And you can also streamline your approval process. There is no need to reapprove items that have already been approved in the work plan. And here's the data point. The San Francisco Roundtable, their general meetings, they meet every 2 months for 2 hours, and they have 23 members, and there are plenty of public comments. The other thing I want to say is more committee meetings doesn't mean necessarily more budget. You should empower the committee chairs to decide if Steve and or Evan need to attend all or some portion of the committee meetings. Yes, they will need Steve's time and maybe Evan's time, but not always. So be frugal. My second comment is echoing what has already been said by some roundtable members. Streamline the number of people involved in some activities. Having 3 people involved in setting agenda, reviewing action items or deliverables is not needed. You don't need the consultant, the chair of the roundtable or the committee, and the project manager. You only need 2 people. That's plenty, and that's just fine. And also, again, as mentioned with Lisa, should review the deliverables by EN, not the project manager. There is no need to approve. There's a difference between administering a contract and concurring with every deliverable of a contract. So please do the work on item 7 as Glenn suggested. Thank you.
Thank you, Mauricio. Robert Holbrook. Robert Holbrook.
I just got the unmute thing. So first, I'd like to sincerely thank the cities and the county who have remained with the roundtable despite the budget constraints you're facing. The roundtable also needs to make do with less. And it's now proposed that we scale back to 4 meetings a year with 4 meetings of each working group. Like Marie-Jo, I hope we can dial that up. And that does seem possible because the budget assumes in-person meetings. So as a surplus develops, can we have more meetings? The answer per the draft contract could be no, since ESA is not obligated to support more than 12 meetings a year. I hope we can change that. Counting the chair, the budget proposes 5 managerial/administrative people at every meeting of the roundtable and 4 at the working groups. That means we'll have more administrative people than members at the working groups. We need to rethink this top-heavy and expensive approach. The San Francisco Roundtable gets by with half as many people by combining the administrative and program management functions and having the technical expert attend maybe half the meetings. and I can't recall an attorney ever being present. Like many of you, I believe it would be desirable to amend the contract per Lisa's suggestions. Perhaps the Cities Association needs some high-level approval of what is in the contract, but they don't need to be involved in every decision. And that I think the contract would be strengthened if it were removed. Finally, I hope that the working group meetings can cost a lot less than the full roundtable meeting, with administrative people attending only as deemed necessary by the working group chair. And when we do return to in-person meetings, perhaps expenses can continue to be kept down by having some paid attendees continue to show up remotely. With your consideration of these changes, I'm hopeful we can have more meetings than has been proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Jennifer Tassif, and then Jennifer Landesman. Jennifer Tassif.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to mirror exactly what Robert said. I mean, he said word for word almost what I was about to say. We really need more than 12 meetings per year potentially. And I think that contract, that scope of work limits us, and that's a problem. So we need to be able to amend it. The other thing is I wanted to mention that the Oakland Noise Forum, which is for Oakland Airport, basically has something on their website that says the forum is not subject to the Brown Act or Sunshine Ordinance. However, every effort is made to follow the noticing requirements of the Sunshine Ordinance. So we might want to look at how they are organized, that they don't have to meet the Brown Act necessarily. It may solve part of our attorney problem. Not that I don't think we should meet the Brown Act, but if legally we can, organize in a similar fashion and maybe avoid some sort of contractual problems or whatnot, maybe we should look into that. And again, what Robert said about ESA and other members, about 2 staff members attending the meetings every single time, doesn't make sense to me, especially for the technical working group and the legislative group. At minimum, if there's travel expenses and such, they should be just viewing on Zoom or however to keep travel expenses or whatnot down. And the other thing is this has all been budgeted for in-person meetings, as Robert mentioned. That means we've over budgeted for these meetings. So I think we can have more than 12 meetings. Again, some of these things, people said excellent things, Liang, et cetera. So I just wanted to mirror some of those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Normally we do not respond, but there's something that I do need to bring up because I'm sure Shantine is jumping up and down about a comment you made about the Oakland Noise Forum. They are not elected officials. We are elected officials. And once as elected officials, we are involved, then we are Brown acted.
Oh,
that has nothing to do with it.
Jennifer Landesman. Jennifer Landesman.
There we go. I was just unmuted.
Yes.
Thank you. I want to thank Andy and can you hear me? I don't see
yes.
The clock wasn't going. Okay. I want to thank Andy and the Cities Association for, for everything, because I think growing this body in its best possible way, I think everybody's making that effort and I appreciate that. And I also echo and appreciate the comments from all the roundtable members that the bottom line is really to make the work more productive to respond to community concerns, which is what brought us here in the first place. I've heard a lot about meetings and so forth. I sent an email to the roundtable members about the IFP Gateway report, which, and I completely agree with all of these, cutting down on websites, individual responses, but there's a critical report that is going to have to drive any technical work. And that is how the IFP Gateway information is relayed to the public. Right now, it's in reframing of what the IFP Gateway says. And we really need to put that either on a landscape spreadsheet form and add columns in order to write down the date, the environmental determination for any activities and so forth. I have a lot of feedback on how that can be improved. If there isn't enough information, that should fall under part of the technical work, which is that our consultants should get that information from the FAA because it's out there somewhere. So I really want to emphasize that there is one core report that has to drive everything and can drive everything, so we can actually even be on the same page with the FAA or try to work in a truly collaborative manner. It's the only way. I mean, otherwise we're, you know, it was kind of like I couldn't make heads or tails of the contract because it was all about, you know, budget for meetings and about meetings, but we really have to talk about some of these content reports that are crucial. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I don't see any more hands raised for attendees. Back to participants. I think one thing that has come about that I think we have been able to experience is how ESA was able to work within the amount that we budgeted for them and moved between the items that we needed to do without our having to come back and review the scope of work. So I think I'm hoping that you will agree with me on that. This is something that's really important to get through today. I have a question for Steve because Glenn brought up an option for us. I looked at item number 7, and I'm not sure that we as an ad hoc would have the ability, as this is noticed on our agenda, to review the things that we've brought up today. Steve, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think they're related, but a little bit separate. Certainly, in terms of the ad hoc committee in item number 7, there could be ways in which you recast our role or the program manager's role that would have impacts on the scope and the budget. But at least moving forward until that changes, we probably need to approve in whatever form the roundtable sees fit, the budget and the scope, again, in whatever form that you see fit. So before we actually get to the point of being able to set up a committee to address this idea of becoming independent. I agree with Glenn that some of those changes could potentially be put into that, but I think they're really 2 separate items at this point in time. The other thing, while I have the floor, Madam Chair, is we're woefully over time here. We spent more than an hour on this topic, and we probably will have to cut something else from the agenda if we're going to end on time.
Okay, Glenn, you have your hand up, and then I'm going to entertain a motion.
I was ready to make a motion.
And Steve had already offered one. Is yours anything like Steve's?
Let Steve go, it's fine.
And I'll look to you for a friendly amendment.
No, I was just going to make a motion that we approve the budget as presented so we can get this done, and any changes to it can be done at a subsequent meeting as appropriate. We're still under the guise of the Cities Association, and that's my guide.
Glenn, do you have any?
No, I was just going to second that.
You're going to second it real good. Okay, then I'm going to call the question unless we need clarity. Liang?
I'd like to make a replacement motion that we revise the budget to remove the attorney cost at every meeting, and we clarify what Anita said about the website cost and the response to community members, so that it's recorded that the roundtable would like those costs to be reduced. And
what I'm hearing from you, Liang, it differs from the initial motion only having to do with the attorney. There was some feeling that I believe that in Steve's motion, if you could clarify that Steve Preminger's motion, that Steve Alverson and ESA would be able to move within the budget that we have, and if need be, cut back on things such as public communication or website time.
Yeah, I thought
That's
Anita's points were excellent points, and I think that can be accomplished with that. My only concern is I don't know if we can unilaterally remove the attorney without the approval of the Cities Association. And so that's why I make the motion that I did.
I don't think we need their approval. They don't control us. They are
do.
just our fiscal
They absolutely
agent.
do.
They absolutely do, Liang. They are
They're
our
our
fiscal
fiscal
agent.
agent. Why should they control how we
That's
spend
what a fiscal
money?
agent does.
Let me ask, does the cities association have an attorney sitting in their legislative review committee meeting, their board meeting, and at their executive committee meeting?
We do now. Beginning this fiscal year, we will.
So you didn't have that?
No, and it was a problem.
But I think the reason having an attorney usually is because that we make decisions that will have legal impact, which we don't. And also, I'd like to clarify what Marilyn said earlier. This body is not a Brown Act body. We choose to be a Brown Act body.
It is absolutely a Brown Acted body.
It is.
Why is that required? We are not created by another Brown Act
I'm sorry,
body.
I can't get into that argument now when we're so far behind. We are a Brown acted body, and that's it.
By whose authority?
I'm looking for a second for your motion, Liang.
Okay, yeah.
I don't hear a second. So we'll move on the motion as proposed by Steve Preminger and seconded by Glenn Hendricks. Again, I'm going to call you by where you were initially on the screen. Lisa, will you, are we going to approve the revised 2021 annual balanced budget, operating budget, with the update as the motion was presented through Steve? Will you say aye or nay?
Can I ask another question? Then
No,
how
I've
are we
called the
going
motion.
to?
Liang, I've called the motion. I am now calling on individuals to vote aye or nay.
But are we going to communicate with Cities Association on this issue?
I will be definitely communicating with Cities Association on this issue. Yes, I already have begun that. And Lisa, yes or no?
Sorry, I guess you didn't hear me. I said no.
You said no. Okay. Lydia.
No.
Glenn.
Yes.
Liang.
No.
Anita.
No.
Whoops. Steve Preminger.
Yes.
Kathy Watanabe.
Yes.
Saratoga, me, yes. The motion fails. The noes are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The yeses are 1, 2, 3, 4.
That is
Anita.
incorrect.
Pardon me?
We only have 8 people.
We do. Oh, yeah, I see. So it's 4 and 4, but then it fails. Anita.
I'd like to offer a new motion, Madam Chair.
Please.
I would like to move the budget with the following change and the following notes. Reduce the amount allocated to the attorney to $5,000 and put the balance into the reserve at this time with potential use elsewhere. That we approve this budget with the understanding that the scope of work should be interpreted so that, and the operation of the roundtable should be interpreted so that the Cities Association has the acknowledged fiduciary responsibility and contract administration responsibility, but that the elected officials who serve on the committee have responsibility through the chair for all technical and policy matters, and that should it be necessary, we would look to amend the scope of work to reflect that sense in the future.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a second from Lisa. I need discussion on this. Shantine, I'm going to look to you.
Well, go ahead and ask, and I guess rephrase the question, Marilyn. Is the issue the revision of the budget at this point, and whether that's a possibility to move in this manner?
Yeah. I'm hoping you heard what Anita was proposing, and that
I did.
And I'm wondering if it is legally doable.
It's legally doable, but there's still some oversight directed by the Cities Association as the fiscal agent, and that falls to Andy. So there will be certain things that are within her purview, particularly as the bylaws are currently constructed, staff and staff at her direction. I don't believe that Andy has been directing any policy work, but to the extent that she is, that's not necessarily in something within her purview. She's working on the administration of the roundtable. So there's nothing, I mean, Anita's motion seems otherwise valid and something that can be worked on in the future. Just, again, I'd reiterate that the constraints exist in the bylaws for the Cities Association as a fiscal agent.
Okay, Anita, would you restate the motion? Sorry to do this, but I want to be sure we're all clear.
Okay, that we reduce the legal, I move that we adopt a fiscal year 2021 budget with the following change, but otherwise as presented, and that is to reduce the legal expense to $5,000, placing the balance in the reserve. That we approve this budget with the understanding that the Cities Association is our current fiscal agent and has a proper role in the administration of the contract, but that the operation of and the technical and policy decisions are reserved to elected officials. And if the scope of work needs to be changed to reflect that sometime in the not too distant future, we would make such changes. It's all right, he's very cute.
That's it.
Just put him in your lap, you'll be fine.
At 50 pounds, I won't be fine. But thank you, Gracie. No, baby. So that's it. So a limit to $5,000, remainder to reserve. Regarding the budget, Cassie will remain the current fiscal agent, and the administration of the contract and technical and policy to go to the elected officials. And Lisa, I believe you
serve the elected officials who serve on
yes, on the
because obviously there are elected officials with Cassie, so I want to be clear
that. Good. And Lisa, you're good with that? Then I'm going to do the call. Mountain View, aye or nay?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Palo Alto.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sunnyvale.
I will vote yes, but I also think we're not done talking about this topic.
Okay. Cupertino, Liang. Liang, unmute yourself and yes or no, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Los Altos.
Yes.
Thank you. Santa Clara County.
No.
Santa Clara City.
No.
Saratoga, I've got to vote yes, I've got to get this through. So it passes 6-2 with the idea that there will be more work to be done and that I will be in contact with Cities Association. We have been at this for almost 2 hours, a little over 2 hours. I'm going to give us a 5-minute break and expect us all back by then. Thank you.
Brother.
Mary Lynn,
Yes, Elisa.
when we get to item 6, could you start with the process you want to use to go through those items in terms of like presentations, questions, public input, comments, like what order do you want stuff in?
Sure.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
certainly. It's been 5 minutes. I'm not seeing everyone's pictures. I'm seeing everyone muted. It helps if you unmute yourself just for a minute to make sure I've got everyone back.
This is Glenn, I'm back.
Yay, Glenn. Good. Okay. Liang, Lydia. Okay, good, good. We're gonna proceed then. Thank you all. All right, we move on to item number 5, which is reassign the Legislative Committee and Technical Working Group membership to respond to the changed composition of the roundtable to comply with the Brown Act.
Madam Chair, I feel compelled to say that this is not a requirement of the Brown Act that's forcing us to do this. We can choose to do this. It's not intrinsically a Brown Act problem.
Okay. As chair of the roundtable, per our bylaws, Article 7, subcommittees, item 3A, the chairperson at his or her discretion may appoint any roundtable representative or alternate to serve on a standing subcommittee or on an ad hoc subcommittee. With that said, given the fact that we had lower numbers in membership, we did need to make sure that we did not overdo our quorum. And so for legislation subcommittee, I am authorizing Lisa to be the chair and Glenn and Kathy to remain on the legislative subcommittee. For the technical working group, I am reauthorizing Anita to be the chair and confirming that Lydia and now Liang will serve on that committee. I don't know that that is something that needs to be discussed. It's something that I have, but certainly because we should have public comment. If there is any discussion on this from the roundtable members, I'll take it now, but make it brief. I don't see anybody, and I'm not seeing any one of the attendees responding at this point. Up, somebody's on board. Jennifer, I'll give you 1 minute.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't hear part of this, but I'm assuming there was a limitation to membership in some of the committee meetings due to the Brown Act perceived violation. Is that not the case?
It's not a violation. It has to do with the fact that we are reconfigured with only 9 members and that we have to be careful that we do not have too many on one committee. It was very nice to have so much enthusiastic volunteerism in the beginning when we were together with our Santa Cruz and Monte Sereno people, but now we're just reconfiguring based on the number having to do with the number of the roundtable members. So I don't believe, Steve, let me check with you, that I need to even have a vote on this. Is that correct? It's by the chair, by the bylaws.
That is correct. It's your appointment.
Okay, then it's done. Congratulations to all of you. I do want to say at this point, while we are looking at this, I have said it over and over, that the 2 subcommittees are going to be the workhorse. It doesn't diminish our standing as a roundtable meeting as a whole. I am looking to the 2 subcommittees to do the majority of the work, to be able to react in a timely manner and to carry forward with the goals and objectives that we put in our strategic plan and our work program. So moving on, we're going to go to committee reports. We have had the luxury of having both the legislative subcommittee and the technical working group meet. I am going to be calling on Lisa first. We're going to be withholding a public comment until both of the chairs have had an opportunity to present what their committees determined they wanted to do as their priorities. And having watched both subcommittee meetings, the most 2 recent ones, I know that both chairs were wonderful about including the public in their meetings and taking their comments seriously and under consideration and informing the priorities they received. That said, there is something here that I need to reiterate that I said at the very beginning, where I regard these 2 subcommittees to be the workhorses of the roundtable at this point. I think we have to be sure that we all remain focused, we remain realistic, we remain educated and informed, and as we have seen with this past item having to do with the scope of work and the budget, we have to be fiscally conservative, which means there can be a whole bunch of things that we want to do, but it doesn't mean that effectively we can have an impact on them. So with that, Lisa, I'm going to call on you. You have several different priorities you want to discuss, and one being the letter and your priorities. So I'll let you decide which direction you want to go. Again, your recommendations, you've given a really good report. If you want to go over that quickly as best you can. Thank you.
Thank you. So the Ledge Committee met on June 10th to discuss our work priorities. And as you just said, we really wanted to be focused on the few things that we think will have the biggest impact. We could boil the ocean, but we don't want to. We want to focus. So on page 18 of the packet, you'll see the table there that has the 4 items that we prioritized. Item 1 is already done. That was our input on the proposed rule for supersonic aircraft noise certification. And then the second item was to provide input to the Quiet Skies Caucus for their meeting with the FAA administrator, and I'll circle back to that.
Good.
And then the item 3 is we want to propose policies around new noise metrics. So not necessarily what the actual metric is, but the policies that would help craft the metrics. And then number 4 is how to address public health impacts as well as environmental impacts of the noise and emission. And during the meeting, we assigned item 3 to Mr. Hendricks, and or Councilmember Hendricks, and item 4 to Councilmember Watanabe. And we thought we would have the next meeting to discuss either one or both of those after they've had the opportunity to put together their proposals. So now I'm going to go back up to item 2, which is the input to the Quiet Skies Caucus. So the Ledge Committee discussed this, and we received an email from one of our congressional staff members that the staff members of the Quiet Skies Caucus members were going to be getting together for a briefing, and they specifically thought it would be helpful to have input from the roundtable on the topics we're interested in for that meeting, and so that they could be discussed at the briefing, and then hopefully eventually when the Quiet Skies Caucus actually held their meeting. So we still don't know what date that meeting will take place. We originally heard it was the end of summer. It's probably going to be later than that, it seems like. But you know, I think all of us know that it's really important to work with the staff members of your representatives so that they can prepare your representative adequately. So we put together a letter. We talked about the points during the meeting, the Ledge Committee meeting, and drafted a letter with the help of Mr. Alverson. And we leveraged the work plan that says that on exception, the chair can authorize an action. And in this case, we did that because the staff meeting was going to happen fairly soon, at least before the roundtable had the opportunity to get together again. So I'm not quite sure what happened, although I can guess. But we were asked to bring that letter back to the full roundtable for roundtable support of that letter. And so that's what we're doing here today. So you'll see my asks, which are to approve that letter. And this time we would have both the chair and the Ledge Committee chair sign it. We would also like the roundtable to approve us working on items 3 and 4. And we would bring those items back to the full roundtable. We also would obviously need to have 2 more meetings approved, and then a special meeting if we need it. So I don't personally believe that we need the roundtable to approve meetings. I think we only need them to approve actions, but not everybody has that same perspective, which is why I'm bringing it, because it's really important that we just get stuff done. And so if this is what we have to do, then this is what we will do for now until we change it. So those are the asks. And then I want to back up and give, I believe, is Mr. Pike still on the line or at the meeting?
He is.
I see him. We were wondering if he could give us an update on the Quiet Skies Caucus members staff briefing with the FAA. A quick one.
Tom, you are muted.
Hold on.
Well,
there we go.
there we go.
Okay, you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Lisa. And yeah, to clarify, the Quiet Skies Caucus has not yet met again. So any recommendations approved by the roundtable today will be conveyed by the 3 congressional offices to the caucus in a timely manner to be considered by them. I was just informed yesterday that the next caucus meeting, next hearing with the administrator will be, quote, sometime this summer. With no definition of what that means. Now, given the focus on CARES 2 negotiations over the next couple of weeks, and then there's the August break, I'm assuming that means September. But again, our 3 congressional offices will convey any communications authorized by the roundtable promptly to the caucus. So unfortunately, I don't have a specific date, but it's not, it's not going to be this week or something like that. And I understand that there was kind of a bit of a rush for the Ledge Committee because we were aware at the time that there was a June 25 Quiet Skies, excuse me, caucus staffers meeting with the FAA. I did talk to someone from our office who attended that. And by the way, in the future, I will be able to attend those remotely. And we'll be in communication with our other congressional offices, with SU and Panetta's offices on that. But the staffers meeting did focus primarily on alternatives to the DNL report that was released by the FAA in April. In other words, noise metrics, as well as a couple of other issues. I asked the attending staff member about noise dispersion and was told that this was raised by someone at the meeting, noting that NextGen has concentrated noise along rails, but that the FAA staff essentially dismissed dispersion as just moving noise around, and they did not view it as a solution. I think that's no news to anyone. The point is that the roundtable is free to convey whatever concerns and priorities they want to the Quiet Skies Caucus through our 3 congressional offices. But I did want to convey that that was kind of a heads up as to what was being discussed among the staffers in anticipation of an upcoming caucus meeting. SST was not raised at that meeting, but our letter from the 3 offices did subsequently go out, reflecting the previously authorized letter from the roundtable on that issue. So I think I can speak on behalf of the other congressional offices that we're working together to convey the requests of this roundtable. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Tom. If I may, Lisa, I do need to explain that it was my understanding at the time that I did the okay by urgency, by exception, that I thought that the FAA director was going to be attending the meeting. I didn't understand it was going to be staffers, and I might have had a different response, but I am really happy that you did meet, because for me, it was extraordinarily important that you as a committee were able to establish your priorities. And so with that, especially relying on what Tom Pike has said and input that I've gotten from Karen Chapman, and also from watching your meetings, I'd like to make a suggestion for your consideration. And that is that since dispersion has been a non-starter for both airport directors, and perhaps one of the reasons that they will not take us on themselves as an organization, as cities has, I'm very concerned that before we begin to ask for dispersion, that we get educated on it. And so what I'm requesting is that on the next roundtable meeting, full body roundtable meeting, that we have Steve present, and we have sort of alluded to this, information on the realities of dispersion in our Bay Area Metroplex, so that we all know what the possibilities are. Over and over, the MIT study out of Boston has been brought up as a possibility. And I'd like to see if that can be converted, or if the possibilities exist in our Metroplex area before we start saying to the FAA director that we want to see dispersion happen. I think we stand a stronger foundation if we can say specifically, we know this is going to happen. I've heard today there's perhaps 2 meetings. We hope there'll be at least 1 with the FAA director. I would like to be able to go back, should we find opportunities for dispersion, to be able to be on solid ground and say, look, this is what we are looking for. So I'm hoping that the roundtable members will consider this as a really good education opportunity and something that we can move forward with. And I just really appreciate how you have divided up the other items. And I'm really happy to see that the noise metrics is on there over and over. We're hearing information that they're ready to consider it. I think it's a really good top priority. And we always have been concerned with addressing public health impacts and environmental impacts of noise and emissions. The other thing that I didn't get a chance for you to mention, didn't give you a chance, Lisa, is that you've now connected with Eric out of Anna Escher's office, our representative Anna Escher's office, for legislation. And I'm hoping that should that come up, that will continue to be a possibility as we stay nimble. And that's it from me.
So did you want to, I feel like we should have public input before we take any action on this part. So do you want to now hear from the technical working group, and then we'll circle back after public input?
Perfect.
Okay.
Real good. Anita?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We met once. Ed was not able to join us, and of course is now no longer going to be a part of the working group, and we will lose Glenn, but as you'll see, we put him on the hook for something before he transfers over, I hope, to the other group. And what we did was we took everything in the work plan where we are indicated as a resource and looked at that, looked at where is that subject, what's happening, what's likely to happen, what's the timing of what's likely to happen, and what should we do in terms of prioritizing both our time and potentially the resource time from ESA. And so without distinction between the two, we raised two priorities to the top. Those were looking at SURFR, and I want to speak to that for a moment because we did have an update today, but what we strongly recommend to and are seeking from the roundtable chair is a letter to the FAA requesting a full update. And I'm not going to rework all the comments that were made earlier in today's meeting, but I think this is simply an expression that the technical working group recognized that we did not yet have the kind of information that we should be having, that we were promised, that was scheduled to happen earlier, and so on. So our first ask is that the roundtable as a group request the chair send a letter to the FAA asking for a truly comprehensive presentation, schedule, next steps, and so on. The second one, again, not a co-priority, it's second on the paper, are the three items that have to do with South Flow. And what we were recommending and what Mr. Hendricks, Councilmember Hendricks has agreed to do is to scope a project, subject to the roundtable agreeing to this, scope a project for ESA to look at where we are on the things that came out of the ad hoc advisory committee. We had a report, we haven't reacted to that report. I think the FAA thinks that it's done, and reading Senator Eleanor Holmes Norton's letter, it's clear that if we don't reply to the FAA, they assume that we're happy and that we will go away. So I think we aren't happy about South Flow and we shouldn't go away. Our response would be to have ESA really look at what the total of what came out of the ad hoc advisory committee's response from the FAA, where we are, and what is a legitimate way to reply back to the FAA with respect to both the changes that they made or didn't make and the items that are out that remain outstanding. So we would be looking, my second ask would be for the roundtable to concur in that, and then to have Mr. Hendricks agree that he's still willing to draft a scope of work. It's a particular skill, I think, that we know that he has. Our other items are in no particular order: Pirate Bodega and SUNY and Loop and the other San Jose non-conforming departures. These were things where we felt, based on what the FAA does, we need to be able to respond. And in some cases, a letter is an easy thing to do. It may not take much time. It may not have been particularly urgent, but at least we would be able to keep something alive and hopefully moving forward for the sake of our residents on these issues. Pirate is a little bit complex because at the time that we met, we thought that there was or could be a request for comment from the public on the 572 report that the FAA provides to Congress. It now appears that there is no request for public comment, that our only opportunity would be and this is with respect to how did the FAA deal with the request and public input on a particular procedure change. It now appears that if we're going to respond, it will be only after the 572 report is actually issued, which may or may not be early October, depending on if it gets slipped again because of COVID. We really felt that with decreased flight operations, we may not have enough data to really talk about the final impacts. But given that what we hope to do with 572 is probably not going to happen, that this last sentence that's here where we said we took note of the FAA's May letter response, and this should say to the roundtable, not City of Palo Alto, my apologies, because they responded to both, that it may be appropriate for us to reply to the FAA on some aspects of that. But again, before we go further, we would want concurrence about both a potential letter in response, as well as looking forward to responding when we see the 572. With Bodega, we would be looking, and this would happen at a next meeting, to write a letter asking for the FAA's plan or working with the SFO roundtable. There had been activity just prior, like in days just prior to our meeting, that indicated that the San Francisco roundtable and the Oakland forum might want to work with us on some things that have to do with Bodega that also tie into the Foyle Waypoint and the Wyong transition. I don't know what the status of that is, but we were favorably disposed to want to cooperate. The subcommittee felt that we would want to do that. But I'm hoping that the chair has some more information she can contribute as to whether we should then plan to take this up as an item in our next meeting. And then with respect to Sunny and Loop and the other San Jose non-conforming, we would defer work on that until there's a lot more air activity and we can collect some more current data and so on. We kept the other things as lower priorities and things that we just aren't going to get to. So then just final comments. 1.1.1, the select committee recommendations did not, in our work plan, assign the technical working group as a resource. So right now there is nothing assigned to us to do about that. If the roundtable thinks there is something that we should do on that, then we need to be chartered to do that. And then I already mentioned about the roundtable. So just to summarize, my asks will be to send the letter on Surfer, to have Mr. Hendricks develop a scope of work for with respect to the ad hoc South Flow stuff, to then decide if we're going to write a follow-up letter to the FAA regarding Pirate, and whether or what we're going to do with respect to cooperating with the San Francisco and Oakland folks.
Thank you, Anita. I agree wholeheartedly. We will continue. I'm happy to write a letter, even though we did get the report from Sky Laren today. We need to continue to put the pressure on. South Flow, I think, is terrific. I would like to see that we loop that in with the training. That was no pun intended, sorry. I don't want to get us mixed up with dispersion, because I think that we need to look at dispersion, whether it's a realistic for any part of South Flow, because that always has been an issue. And you did mention HITR during your subcommittee meeting. And I think those two things are really essential, along with whatever happens. But I'd like to put the dispersion as a training, as a foundation for us as we move forward, as we attach South Flow. Bodega can possibly be connected with the NITE and SFO. And I did get an update. I asked last night and got an update from Ann Wengert out of SFO Roundtable. And it probably comes as no surprise that the FAA came out of the box really excited about working on night, and they've kind of ghosted SFO. But I am still very committed to connecting you with SFO and hopefully Oakland, because they are doing Night Hush also. So that I am hoping that the rest of the Roundtable will agree on that, because I think the three that you have come up with are solid. And I really appreciate the work that you've done.
We have a great group. I'm sorry to lose Glenn. I'm thrilled to add Liang. And I want also to convey to the people who attended from the general public, our residents, how much we appreciate all the help that they give us and contributed during our meeting.
And both of you, as I said before, were very good about taking their input. So I'm hoping that they will respect that when we're running short of time today, because I see two people, Darlene and Jennifer Landesman, who would like to speak on this. I'm only going to be able to give you each 2 minutes, and maybe one for ledge, one for tech, but I'm not going to be able to give you any more if we hope to get out of here tonight. Darlene, I'm ready for you if you would like to make a public comment. And if we can get a clock up. I'm not hearing you, Darlene. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Tom Pike, thank you so much for giving us an update on the Quiet Skies meeting and your continued active engagement. We appreciate it. I heard that at the meeting, the staffers did give feedback to the FAA that the metrics report was not satisfactory. And the FAA was given a specific action that they accepted. And maybe we could follow up on that. It's important to note, even though they're quote unquote staffers, there was action taken, and those meetings are still very important for us. Second of all, the May letter to the FAA on Pirate, we definitely should respond. And similar to previous letters, we're volunteering Member Koo to write the letter so that we can use Steve's resources and other things. So this should not deprioritize or take any resources away from the letter that we need for the Big Sur overlay or the South Flow work that Glenn's working on. So I think that's very important that we concur to send a letter to the FAA and respond to the May letter. And my third point is I would encourage that the technical working group and possibly the Ledge Committee give input on the training for dispersion so that we all get our questions answered, given that there's been activity and interest in that topic. So I think it's important that the committees give input to Steve so that the presentation will in fact meet the expectations and address any ambiguity or confusion or conflict that is around this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Darlene. Jennifer Landesman.
Hi, I'd like to add to the letter that you are planning, or the feedback you're planning to the staffers or to the administrator. It's really important to distinguish alternative metrics, which are in report 188, and the standards, which are report 173. And recently the FAA has given a contract to HMMH to review the neighborhood study, which would inform 173. And I'll follow up with more information about that, but it's critical because the FAA started the review of their standards already about 5 years ago, and they're late on that. And so this really needs to be part of section 173, and I'll follow up. I think it would be good to add all the comments that the public made about community engagement and dialogue to the follow-up with the FAA. And lastly, I believe that dispersion has to be included in whatever language. One other way to add this is to do more research to address noise for arrivals communities who are experiencing concentration. Because I would be, first of all, I'm stunned, Chair, that you would use the airport's ability to decide on dispersion or not, since they know zero about noise, to be the ones calling whether dispersion is a possibility or not. I would be stunned, and just, it would be shameful for our region, when other regions are experiencing these problems, to lead on being shy about addressing the concentration of traffic. So that should definitely stay. And if not, you know, there's got to be a menu of other mitigations or alternatives, and those studies are still needed. The FAA knows a lot more about noise than we think they do, and they can do a lot better. So why are we deciding what they might want to do? And the airport should not be calling those shots.
If I may, thank you, Jennifer. They were not calling the shots on dispersion. They were calling the shots on whether they wanted us as to take us over, because they are opposed to dispersion. So it limits our ability as a roundtable entity, because both of the directors are not happy with the fact that we are proposing dispersion, or have in the past, because they looked at it as if we were moving noise. It was not something that they knew about, and we are going to them. This is why, and we are bowing to them for what you are saying is their knowledge or their ability to act on it. This is why I am saying we want training here, so we have legs to stand on and we sound and know what we're talking about. That's the only thing I'm where I'm coming from. I, as the chair of the roundtable, am working for the success of the roundtable. And it's a very difficult situation we have been put in with the ask from, or the demand from cities, that we try to stand ourselves up. So I am trying to keep the roundtable up and functioning, and making sure that we can function so that we can represent our communities as the best we can. Marie-Jo, 2 minutes.
So I want to comment on 3 things. So the first topic is about that Quiet Sky Caucus FAA meeting in June. So the great news is the legislative committee was quick to act. It was great. But I still don't understand why the letter was retracted and why it needs to be approved now by the roundtable. And the second thing on this, on the Quiet Sky Caucus, it's good to hear that Tom Pike or others will be involved, but it's really unfortunate that no staff from our congressional representative offices attended the meeting in which metrics were discussed. Metrics is a very important topic, if not the most important one, because metrics really define aircraft impact on people. Second topic, dispersion, great suggestion to discuss it, because the lack of dispersion is really at the heart of next gen. The lack of dispersion, that means concentration or rails in the sky. And that's what next gen did. It concentrated these aircraft both horizontally and vertically. And it, by the way, also eliminated routes. And dispersion is not just moving noise around, as the FAA say it is. Concentration is what created the noise gen problem. And yes, we should provide input to Steve on the topic before he makes the presentation. And the third topic I have is a process question about how the roundtable will be able to meet communication deadlines with Congress and or the FAA. The current process, from what I understand, seems to take way too long. It will take probably 3 to 4 months before anything can be sent, because A, the roundtable has to approve the action to create a letter. B, the roundtable or the committee then needs to draft the letter. C, then the roundtable needs to approve the draft of the letter. It takes way too long.
Thank you. Jennifer Tassif.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I thought you were finished.
Oh, sorry. You can't miss this deadline. So please either streamline the current process or then use the exception process to speed things up. But don't retract your letters. If you meet a deadline, you meet a deadline. It's way too top heavy right now in the approval process. Empower your committees and review the document, and you have the chair authority and the discretion. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer Tassif.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am actually glad that the letter was pulled back. Because I think we do, like the chair mentioned, we need to define what we are talking about as far as dispersion. In my opinion, in no case should this roundtable ever be a proponent for shifting noise to new communities where that noise never existed before. When we're talking about dispersion, to me, we're talking about respecting long-standing historical flight paths with prior historical dispersion. We're not talking about moving it to new locations where it never existed before. And when you read this letter, I think potentially, and you know, I probably was at fault here as well, because I talked about dispersion as well and probably didn't clarify. We need to clarify that we're talking about historical dispersion to where the flights were previously. It's very, very key here. So I'm very glad this was pulled back and there's going to be a discussion. As far as San Jose South Flow, I think Anita was pretty clear on what has to be done on that. I'm glad we're going to revisit what was said by the FAA because they basically blew us off on everything. And so we need to come up with ideas on what needs to be done because there needs to be a correction on that. There is no doubt in my mind, we cannot accept no correction on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Rob Holbrook.
Thank you. First, with regard to the technical working group, I expect there may be a motion soon to accept the reports that have been published, and I would encourage a motion that accepts the technical working group's report with the understandings that Councilmember Inander mentioned verbally in her oral report just now, because that elaborated on some of the points that were in the written report. As to dispersion, I think it is a super topic for focus. In my opinion, it's easy to oversimplify the possibilities here and that oversimplification would lead to a conclusion that it's not possible. In my opinion, we need recent expertise on this topic to have a truly informed discussion. The best discussion of dispersion I'm aware of, and I've been doing everything I can to focus on this issue for years now, appeared in this packet in the letter between the administrator and Eleanor Holmes Norton. And in it, the FAA said, Administrator Dixon said that the FAA has worked with MITRE to investigate operational mechanisms to disperse noise. Through that work, we have identified multiple means of providing systematic dispersion that would use altitude, controller actions, divergent headings, and waypoint relocations. Specific examples where these operational concepts have been used are described below. And then it goes on to say later, the possibility, current PBN technology allows developers to build in some intentional dispersal. For example, an open standard instrument departure, namely an open SID, is an RNAV departure that allows for an embedded section where the plane is radar vectored between two satellite procedures, creating natural dispersion. These are tools that are, it's clear the FAA is looking into, working with MITRE, and it would be good to get expertise that folds that latest information into our presentation at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I don't see anyone else, so I'm going to close the public comment period and ask first Lisa, because she came first on 6A, if you have any thoughts about any changes on what you're proposing.
So the only change I would propose, and that's because we've had, prior to this meeting, some public input, and then here at the meeting, we've had input. I would leave it the same up until the paragraph that starts with third, and that's the section on disbursement. And I personally would like to keep dispersion. I knew that didn't sound right, in here, because we have talked about it quite a bit. And I hear, though, the comments about we need to be more precise about what type we are talking about. And maybe we recast this to say that we want to explore dispersion, and that this is the definition of dispersion that we're kind of using. What I don't want to do is be constrained in terms of looking at this topic, because I think it's a topic that we need to push on. and not say, well, just because the FAA has, said this, or San Jose doesn't believe in this, we're not even going to explore it. I do want to explore it. And we heard that it was brought up at the briefing for the staffers of the Quiet Skies Caucus. So that's what I would change there. And I'm happy to work with the chair, I guess, on that, if folks are okay with that. But then the other items that I'm looking for approval on are for us to work on items 3 and 4 on page 18, and for us to have 2 more meetings so that we can talk about those 2 things, because I don't know if we'll do them at the same time. And then if there is a time-sensitive issue that comes up, that we can have a special meeting.
Lisa, I want your input on the letter. We withdrew it, so it's almost as if we've erased it, but we didn't. And so would you consider, since we don't have a timeline yet, and we don't know exactly how it will work, perhaps we will be able to have the training, but we don't know whether we will on dispersion or not. But if you want to resend the letter out when the FAA Director Dixon is involved, that if that happens before our training, that you will resend the letter but remove the dispersion comment. Sort of like what Jennifer Tassman said, that we could be more specific about what we were looking at. Should we have the training and the meeting has not occurred, the Quiet Skies Caucus meeting, perhaps we could revisit then how we would word the letter for that specific item of dispersion.
Yeah, I would prefer to just leave it in and recast it like I said, but obviously this doesn't have to go out tomorrow. So I think we have some time to work on this, but I would prefer to leave it in. And so I guess I'd look to the roundtable to make that call.
Okay, I want to be clear. I as an individual who had to do this by exception, was never saying don't do dispersion. I'm saying let's just get educated first so that we do speak with authority. So I'm not fighting pushing back on dispersion. I just think we have to be very careful about how, I see you, Anita, how we do represent ourselves when we do write letters to the FAA Director. Yes, Anita.
Could I suggest, and if it's in order, I would make a motion to approve and endorse all of the asks from the legislative committee, and that the letter that what the chair just suggested, which is to work with that the chair of the ledge committee work with the chair of the roundtable on language that would retain dispersion based on our current level of knowledge and understanding. And that therefore the letter would be ready to go if there is an urgency to get it sent. If, on the other hand, we are able to have some further education about dispersion, at that time, we might revise the planned letter and send it. So that we've covered the bases in terms of timing and what could happen and what we would do in the 2 circumstances.
Are you comfortable with that, Lisa?
I am, and I just want to say one more time, although I feel like we've said this many times, when we talk about this, we are not talking about revisiting any of the recommendations that the select committee made.
Right.
So it's not that. I want to assure people.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
So
okay
do I have a
with that.
second on that then, on Anita's?
I'll second it if I can do that.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and call the vote, and then we'll get Anita to yours. Okay. And here we go. Mountain View.
Whoops. Yes.
Do you need to have the statement made again? The motion, you're clear enough on the motion. Okay. Evan is. Okay. Mountain View said yes. Palo Alto.
Yes.
Sunnyvale.
Yes.
Cupertino.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Los Altos.
Yes.
Santa Clara County.
Yes.
Santa Clara.
Can everybody please mute themselves, because there's all kinds of feedback now.
Steve Preminger made a note in the chat box that he had to leave. So
Okay. Santa Clara City.
Yes.
Thank you. And Saratoga, yes. Okay, great. Now we go to Anita, and your major asks. I believe that was South Flow, Bodega, and Night with Surfer, with a letter to Surfer, and Night with SFO, and a letter with regarding Surfer.
Let me do it for you.
Please. Yes.
A letter regarding Surfer. Mr. Hendricks to develop the South Flow scoping document. A letter on Pirate with a preparation for another response after the 572 comes out, and work with the work on something for Bodega and potentially with the other roundtable and forums. That's it. That's my four asks.
Is that including
unless somebody wants us to look at something with select committee, because otherwise we're not working on 1.1.1.
No, you're not. So clarification, does that include Night with SFO along with Bodega? Okay.
Yes, I did not indicate those, Madam Chair, because in our original scope for this meeting, we were limited to what was in our work plan, and Night Hush is not in our work plan. So it was introduced as an ancillary thing during the course of our discussion because of the possibility of working with SFO. So I wasn't sure I should properly put it in here or not, but I would like to take Mr. Holbrook's suggestion, which is this motion is based on the other comments and information that has happened since that meeting, including what we heard today.
Yeah. And item 6 on your 1.3.2, item 6 with SFO collaboration, and item 1.3.6 SFO Oakland FOIL Young, they all may very well get wrapped into the same thing depending on what SFO is doing, as long as we're clear on that.
Broad latitude to work with that full range of things that may or may not be included or may get added.
And probably at the direction of SFO with input from the FAA.
Right.
But I can see Lydia, and I watched the meeting. You're very interested in Bodega, so I don't want that to slip out, right?
Actually, I was gonna get a clarifying question from Anita with regards to the 572 for Pirate. When do we expect that to come out? Because you said the letter would be after the 572.
No, the letter would go before, but there's also the possibility that we would further react to the 572 after it comes out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
and thank
Chair.
you for letting me clarify that, Lydia.
Okay, do I have a second on that?
May I ask a question?
Yes.
A clarifying question. Anita, so who's writing the letters, just so that we know who's doing that work?
Lydia volunteered to write letters.
Okay, thank you.
But with Surfer, you wanted me to continue to ask for
Yes,
a timeline.
I'm sorry. The Surfer letter can come from the chair. The other letter or letters is from Lydia.
Okay, and Lydia, if you would pass them through me before you.
Oh yeah, it's gonna go to Anita,
Yeah.
so then it comes to you.
Good, real good. Okay, I still need a second.
Second. Oh, sorry.
Lydia, second. Okay, we'll take Lydia. All right. Yes and no. Again, roll call vote. Mountain View.
Yes.
Palo Alto.
Yes.
Sunnyvale.
Yes.
Cupertino.
Yes.
Thank you. Los Altos.
Yes.
County is gone. City of Santa Clara.
Yes.
And Saratoga, yes. Passes unanimously with 1 absence or 2 absences. All right. I'm hoping that since I still have we're moving on to item number 7, create an ad hoc committee to explore the possibility of Roundtable becoming independent from the Cities Association. The part that I read about the bylaws in Article 3, item 3A, the chair may appoint standing and ad hoc committees. I am going to be appointing myself, Glenn, and Kathy Watanabe. So we're done with that. We had asked to move member discussion up, but since we are, Kathy had asked to have something. I don't know if there's anybody else that had asked to have any input on member discussion. I don't have a reason anymore as chair. We've pretty much covered it.
Yes, Chair, if I can. I had made a note to myself here. Yeah. So our lobbyists sent some really great information and that I wanted to share, and I'm happy to send to Lisa because there's some legislation that is moving along. Congressman Harley Ruda, who is in Southern California, 48th Congressional District, he got a provision in the House Appropriations Committee report to help address aircraft noise and improve the FAA's community engagement activities. And the language would include increasing funding by $5 million for the FAA to hire additional staff to increase its community engagement capacity, requiring the FAA to submit a report to Congress on activities undertaken by regional ombudsmen under Section 180 of the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018, and requiring the FAA to submit a report to Congress cataloging all FAA programs related to airport, aircraft, and environmental noise, and finally required the FAA to submit a report to Congress on its noise complaint portal, which is expected to be rolled out nationwide later this year. So apparently his office has been working especially closely on noise issues with our Townsend and Associates, who's our lobbyist, and he's been taking the lead in the region on the topic. So so that was really good news, and these instructions to the FAA will go into effect immediately upon finalization of fiscal year 2021 funding. So I'm happy to pass that information along if anybody would like to just have it to follow up with. And that was really all I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. I've been notified that I skipped public comment under the creation of the ad hoc committee. And that may be why Shantine's hand is raised.
That's correct. Thanks so much, Marilyn. Appreciate it.
Do you have something to say, or do you?
No, I was just saying that is exactly what I was going to point out, is that there needs to be an opportunity for public comment for the ad hoc portion of the discussion.
Okay, we'll move back to there. I only see Jennifer Landisman's hand raised at this point. Followed by Robert Holbrook. I can give you 1 minute on the ad hoc.
If the ad hoc, just about the ad hoc conversation, or, becoming a different entity, I think it's really going to be critical what the relationship with the airports is going to be in terms of what you're looking to do. And if you're caught between some sort of conflict with the airports and so forth, I mean, roundtables already have a really, really bad reputation for actually serving the public. I mean, roundtables prevailed over the next gen implementation. So I think the most important thing that should happen is, like, it's news to me that the airports are actually exerting this pressure as to what they would pay for, or what they would support or what they wouldn't support that regards noise. That information should be public. I mean, these are facilities that serve a monopoly of airlines, and they're not doing their part. And so we really need to have a look at this, because as a taxpayer, I don't want to support anything that is just really to be a puppet of the status quo that has led to this situation. So I really think that when you think about the future, you first have to let the public know what it is, who it is that you're serving.
Thank you. I want to be sure that I was not misunderstood. We have been working under the umbrella of the Cities Association. The financial situation now with the airports is not such that they have funds for supporting another roundtable. This is why it's so important for us as an entity to collaborate with SFO's existing roundtable. So we will not be looking at just trying to go with airports. We're going to have to explore other entities and also the possibility of doing a JPA or a 501c4. But this is why the ad hoc is going to be meeting, because we have to explore all the options that may be out there. Robert Holbrook.
Yeah, very briefly, I'll contain my content and just say that it would be helpful if we could know whether or not you're planning to hold these meetings or this meeting as a publicly noticed meeting with the option for the public to attend, or if we would need to provide input to you via email or some other forum in advance of a more private meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Steve, do you want to have any say-so on that, or Shantine on ad hocs, the situation with ad hocs?
I can start. There's no requirement for ad hoc committee meetings to be held in public. So as long as that committee provides its full report back to the roundtable and that sees the light of day, that meets the nature of the requirements. The ad hocs are meant to be a little bit more nimble and allowed to move more quickly than standing committees.
And we certainly would accept input by email if people would like to make suggestions. However, we don't know that we can work at it. There probably will be assignments and not meetings, is how it may very possibly play out. I think that finishes up for the attendees wishing to speak. Go to oral communication for public comment. We are now over time, but I'm hoping that ESA will give us 5 more minutes for the few that may have other items, keeping in mind that we need to stay focused. We need to stay realistic, and we need to stay informed and fiscally conservative. So oral communications, any item not on the agenda. I am not, oh, I am. Who got up there? Jennifer Landisman. 2 minutes.
Hi, I sent an email to the roundtable, which I also addressed to our congressional representative, which is about an inquiry about CADX, which is part of the environmental process. I think this speaks to the part of being informed. I am not seeing that the roundtable has exhibited education about the CADX. There are, you know, as I illustrated in my letter, San Jose Airport, for example, said they were not aware that an EA was used in order to do the NORCAL-OAPM, but they wrote to the public to say that a legislative CADX was used. And over, it's been said that a legislative CADX has not been used. But in answering the 6 questions that I posed is really critical, because how can you make any recommendations if you're not grounded on the very processes that protect the public? And so this is something that either your technical consultant could provide or the congressional offices can provide, but somebody has to come forward, and the FAA could provide, or does it need to be legislation in order for the FAA to respond? But basically what it looks like to me is that the legislative CADX was this double job to kind of not have to do any environmental review under the guise that it would reduce impacts on the public when they already had a tool to do what they're doing right now. So actually the whole, you know, Fonzie scheme is just, it's just such a big, it's sort of a black box, but it isn't. And I hope you will please respond to that CADX inquiry, because I really don't see the future of how you can actually represent us if you don't understand basic environmental processes that the FAA uses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, it's time for a wrap up now. Steve or Evan?
And Madam Chair, since our meeting was so extensive and there were so many items, I was going to suggest that we take the approach we took last month or last meeting at Steve Prematur's recommendation and prepare a brief summary of the actions that the roundtable took, and then send that out to the members. I see Glenn Hendricks shaking his head yes.
Do we need to vote on that?
See head shaking no.
Good. All right.
One brief thing I wanted to mention too, to dovetail off of what Jennifer Landisman just mentioned is, and many of you no doubt saw it in the news, the Council on Environmental Quality at a national level came up with a rework of the National Environmental Policy Act, which is going to lessen in many cases the environmental constraints and hurdles that project proponents need to go through to get their projects approved. It will probably take quite a while for the FAA to put that into their guidance documents, but it's out there and there'll no doubt be a number of lawsuits against that as well. But just want to make sure in the context of environmental clearance, there is the potential for new regs coming down the line.
Thank you. All right. Motion to adjourn.
You can
So
just
moved. We're all agreed. Thank you all very, very much. Great job today. Appreciate. Good seeing you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.